Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the council for April the 1st, 2025. Beautiful morning. Get right to it. Need a motion to accept the agenda. Moved by Way, second by Luker. I wanted to change the agenda to move closed session ahead of bylaws. Any discussion? Anything to add to the agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor? Oh, that's great. Back then. Any declaration of continuing interest in the general nature thereof? Seeing none. Minutes of the March 18th, 2025, moved by Vickers, seconded by Yipman. Any errors or omissions in those minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed, that's carried. Business arises in the minutes, clerk's report 2025. Julie, you wanted to add?
No, I don't have anything to add to this unless there's any questions.
Any questions on this report?
I just
Councilor
have a question regarding the sponsorship on the ball diamond. It says from April till September. Does that mean the signs have to come down at the end of September?
Yes.
Yes, we're actually going to install them so they can just be taken off.
Oh, okay, because they can buy up to 3-year term at a time, right?
Yeah, but we're
I just read that and I've asked.
gonna, just,
Okay, that's fine, that's all I need to know, thank you.
Good. Anything further? Then we get a motion moved by Way, seconded by Gersten. We receive report for information, CL 2025. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed, that's carried. First appointment is 9:05. We've got a couple of minutes. Marielle, you want to do the CAO 7?
So report CAO 7 for council today is requesting additional capital funding for an unanticipated expenditure, which is a new roof on the section of the Durham Hall that was constructed in 1890. So it's not on the rear section, it's on the front section. So the report itself lays out some of the background, also lays out the fact that there wasn't any concerns raised in the BCA, the building condition assessment that was done in 2023. But apparently the roof does need to be replaced. There is leaks. So we're looking at an estimated cost of $10,000. 3 quotes. We have one so far, 2 more to come are being sought. And the Durham Hall Committee discussed this at their March 19th meeting. They'd like to proceed with the roof work prior to improving the insulation in the roof of the building, or the attic, sorry, I should say the attic in the building, which was approved as a project in 2025. An energy committee project, which 100% will be paid for by the municipality. The capital project that was approved for the hall for 2025 was $5,000 for a new sign. The committee is willing to forego that if necessary in 2025. They're also anticipating that the cost could be potentially lower than the $5,000. They're dropping it below the capital threshold that's required by council. So we'd like to get this moving forward as quickly as possible, but also aware that it wasn't represented in the 2025 budget. So the recommendation of staff is that council, if they do approve this, that the additional funding come out of the recreation reserve. And the calculation and financial implication shows the difference that would be coming out in comparison to the sign that was planned for 2025.
Okay, any questions? Seeing none, do we have Councilor Gillis?
I'm supportive in the report of changing that if that's what they like to do. Part that I'll raise that I'm a little concerned about is the building condition assessment, not catching that from 2 years ago. And I have concerns that if there's stuff being missed on this, what other buildings might get missed, or how thorough was that assessment. That raises some concerns, which, you know, we spent good money on having that done, and if this happens again, it's gonna be very upsetting.
Any other questions or comments? Councilor Gibson?
I would agree with Councilor Gillis, and it caught the whole board by surprise as well. We assumed everything was good until the assessment was made to for the installation project, and yeah, we weren't ready for this. And when something as basic as a roof is missed on a VCA, then like you say, how many other things get missed?
We have a motion. Moved by Yipman, second by Gillis, and the motion be received.
Yep.
Moved by Yipman, second by Gillis, result of council chief report CO 7/2025 is information for the council approved the replacement of the metal roof on the original portion of the 1890 Durham Hall with township 75% share of expense being funded from the township recreation reserve, and further the new metal roof project replaced the new sign project in 2025. Any further discussion? Councilor Yip.
Yeah, just to reiterate, our CAO, the sign project's coming in significantly lower than what we'd expected, so the hall board would probably take that on themselves and not make it part of the capital project.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, opposed, that's carried. And we'll move back now to the first delegation. And Helmut, did you want to come forward? It's Robert Hill Wind Farm program, so go ahead, please. Helmut.
Thank you very much. I'm not sure if the presentation is available.
Yes, wait for.
Yeah. Okay, so as you noticed, we have selected provisionally a name for the wind farm that we are proposing. And several names were discussed, and we felt that because of the proximity to the area and the history of Bower Hill Farm, it would be, Bower Hill, it would be an interesting name. It also fits with our Guns Hill Wind Farm and Bower Hill Wind Farm. There's some continuity there. We have checked the nuance on that name, and the name is available. So from this point forward, unless we are directed by council to do differently, we would like to refer to it as Bower Hill Wind Farm. Again, it's provisional, but we like that name. Let me get started while it goes up. I wanna, at this meeting, I wanna try to avoid repeating so many things that we talked about before. Up until now, we're trying to talk to council about our vision. I think at this point in time, at least from our perspective, and we don't want to be presumptive about that, we want to be more direct in providing true direct information that we have so far researched, that we have developed. So you will see reports that we are referring to that I will be leaving with council after this meeting. But I want to just give a quick overview. The vision for Bower Hill Wind Farm would be 6 wind turbines, a total of 36 megawatt capacity for those 6 turbines. They are located near the 401 corridor in the area just west of Woodstock, and also in the Hydro One distribution circuits. It's in a very interesting area. We researched a whole number of areas in Oxford County and the greater area, and that area seems to be have plenty of distribution lines that still have good capacity. And of course, as Woodstock grows, as the area grows, more and more capacity is needed. So we have confirmed the capacity for 2 lines. I'll get into it a little bit more in details. The M44 line going towards Ingersoll and the M9 line going into TS Woodstock. Both of them have 18 megawatts capacity, and both of those lines would be targeted for energy infusion. It aligns, we believe it aligns with the Oxford County strategic plan for renewable energy, and we want to develop, or want to show that we want to develop with community input. You may recall that we had a much larger wind farm in mind for that area. We have also talked to almost all or most of the landowners in that area and got mixed reviews, but mostly positive review. But we decided to scale the wind farm down to what we feel at this point in time might be a more manageable size, which is 6 wind turbines rather than the 30 or 28 wind turbines that we envisioned originally. That is in direct response of the feedback that we got from the community. Some may agree with that, some may disagree with that, but I feel that we wanted to be responsive to the feedback from the community in that area. Next slide, that's why I'm saying right size the project to 36 megawatt. The Bower Hill Wind Farm will generate enough electricity to supply many homes in southwest Oxford and surrounding areas. With the vision of making this a distribution connected project, the advantage is, I think it's philosophical. The energy is being used right in the area, whereas transmission projects, which are, I'm not bashing those good projects, that the electrons flow wherever they're needed most in further away areas. But distribution connected projects tend to be, the energy is used right in the local area. We of course want to reduce emissions. That's our mantra, our goal. The project helps shift Oxford County away from fossil fuel, cutting greenhouse emissions and reducing carbon footprint for the generations to come. And it's supporting the Ontario energy goals. Those goals have been clearly stated by the minister and taken up by the IESO. Hence, the IESO is making these procurement office over the next 5 to 6 years, starting with the procurement this year of approximately 1,500 to 2,000 megawatt of new capacity in Ontario. We believe that the area that we have selected is a strategic location that has the infrastructure that is needed to build such a project. The project location near the 401, of course, offers great transportation access. If we looked at both exits on the 401, and both of them basically would allow us to use very little municipal road, basically bring the parts, the blades, the towers, and then ourselves all the way to the 401 exit, either before or the one after. Both of them seem to be feasible. And then it's only about 6 to 7 kilometers of transportation on municipal roads for both sections of the Bower Hill Wind Farm. We also anticipate a reduced noise impact because of the ambient traffic noise from the 401. We are commissioning a noise study in that area just to see what impact does that have. We have a preliminary study that was done a little bit further back. That's why we're going to ask a new study by acoustics. And that study shows us that the ambient noise around the 401, and I don't know yet if it's 1 kilometer or 1.5 kilometers, is 50 dB, which is significantly above the 40 dB that we will be emitting to non-participating noise receptors. So that is not allowing us to do anything more or differently. We're still placing all of the turbines 550 meters as a minimum away from any noise receptors. But what it does, it's allowing us to assume that the noise impact will be even less. Because if the 401 during the daytime, now at nighttime might be a little bit differently, but during the daytime emits about 50 dB constant noise level, it is very, very unlikely that any of the noise receptors will ever hear the turbines. But we'll wait until the noise study is done and then we report that to council. The proximity to the Hydro One circuits, as I mentioned before, are helping us. It's not without any problems. The lines that are going to the substations where we envision them may need an upgrade from the 3R to no, is it 556 or 557? 336. 336 or then the 576 MCIL. But that is up to Hydro One. Hydro One will make that decision when it comes. So there is a small section on either one, the northern and the southern project, that may be upgraded with new poles. We've done the same thing at Guns Hill. It's not problematic. It's a cost thing that we would have to bury. Hydro One passes all that cost on to the developer. And then we have commissioned an agricultural impact assessment for the Bower Hill Wind Farm. in order to find out how can we minimize the impact by using the shortest access roads or prioritizing lower classification, land classification, and buried collector lines. We have several reports that I'm going to mention in a moment. We have now the draft report of the agricultural impact assessment phase 1 completed. I will leave that with council afterwards. What we were able to do in the report, you will see that the recommendation is that alternative sites have been considered, and the assessor feels that the site that we chosen is a good site. We were able to move all but one turbine out of class 1 land into class 2 or class 3 land. It's still prime agricultural land, and we are fully aware of that. But we were trying to avoid class 1 land. We moved one more turbine just very recently. We're running that through our lab right now in order to move it out of class 1. There's only one turbine because of the setback restrictions, and we'll show that in the report, cannot be moved out of class 1, and it's just at the edge of class 1 land, but it is the turbine foundation would be sitting on just on the edge of class 1 land. We have developed a community engagement plan, and we had submitted that to staff and got valuable feedback from staff. Thank you very much for arranging that. We have updated the community engagement plan with those recommendations. Who are we engaging with? Program is collaborating with local landowners, First Nation communities, municipal leaders, business leaders, and local co-op, and the residents to shape the project that aligns with regional needs. And how are we engaging them? Through the open dialogue, public meetings, and transparent planning. We ensure that all voices are heard and respected throughout the development. I also have the community engagement plan here that I will be submitting to council, which clearly lays out I call it first part of communication plan, because after we did the required communication, we will do more after that. So this plan is going all the way to submission of the project. If the project is awarded, we'll submit a new communication plan that goes from that point all the way to the end of construction. And then there will be a third plan developed that's throughout the operations. We are committed, we've done this at Guns Hill, to continue to communicate with the community and with council, even through the operations, because questions could come at that point as well. So we want to make sure that we're communicating all the way through the life cycle of the project. The program is preparing to submit a bid for the ISO 2025 LT2 ERFP to develop a Bower Hill wind farm. This renewable energy project will generate 36 megawatts from 6 modern wind turbines in southeast Oxford. We have reviewed the community plan, as I mentioned, with staff and got the valuable feedback. And we are implementing this plan starting with the Bower Hill Wind Farm website page and the interactive question page that provides open and transparent communication. We are anticipating that this page will open publicly this Friday. So at that point in time, anybody that is interested to get more information on that will see on the website or on that the website is already open, but on that web page, specific information, high level information about the Bower Hill Wind Farm. As I mentioned before, I feel that at this point in time, if council is in agreement with that, we want to go into more of a reporting relationship. I know we talked about vision, we talked about why we're doing this, but we have prepared 9 reports that are listed here, and I'll go through them in a second. I said we'll deliver it within 10 days, but we were able to complete them, and I will leave them with you today. I'll start with the communication engagement plan that we already talked about. So it's clearly setting out dates. For instance, our first community meeting will be at one of the Guns Hill turbines on April 15th, where we invite the farmers in the area where we want to build the wind farm to, if they wish to do so, to come to the Guns Hill wind farm And we will review one turbine with them, at least so they see visually, what does this look like? What does it sound like? What is the access road like? And what are the what does the foundation look like? So there's so many questions we want to answer that there. We specifically put that date, April 15th, hoping that we catch the landowners before the seeding or the planting season starts. Our first public meeting is planned for either May 23rd or 24th. In general, most farmers that I talk to, they say, well, if we don't finish planting by May 24th, we're a little bit late. So we wanted to make sure that we give enough time, and hopefully we did give enough time and have that meeting on the 23rd or the 24th. Why those 2 days? 23rd is a Friday, 21st is a Saturday. We are okay with both. We probably would like your input and we will ask the landowners too. Is Saturday morning better for you or is Friday evening better for you to have a public meeting? We'll probably try to get Fulton's Hall, the Fulton's Hall for that, which is close to the area and large enough for a public meeting. We have not rented that yet. If you have a different suggestion, we're very open to that. Again, trying to be cognizant of most landowners will not be available, you know, after the 15th and before the May 24th, to keep that 6-week window free for farmers to focus on their planting. Hopefully, we pick those dates correctly. The next report is the community participation report, and in that report we have 2 signed letters of intent. One of them from the 6 nations of the Grand River. They signed a letter of intent that they want to partner in this project as a First Nations partner. And the second one is from the Oxford Community Energy Co-op, which is the local co-op that partnered in the Gunsel Wind Farm. They signed a letter of intent saying if offered, we would like to partner with ProWind in order to make this a true community co-op. So those are 2 signed letters of intent that we have. The next report is the agricultural impact assessment. It's a little bit of a larger report. It was done by a consultant at DBH Soil Services. And that consultant was recommended to us by one of our consultants, which is name just escapes me right now. NRSI. NRSI is a consultant we have used in Gunsel extensively, both on the pre-planning phases as well as throughout the post-construction phases. And we trust them. We feel that they're well respected. They do government reports all the time for the Ministry of Environment, and they recommend DBH Soil. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them, but there's the full phase 1 report. It's so important to recognize that the agricultural impact assessment comes in 2 phases. The full assessment is significantly larger than phase 1 because at that point in time, it looks at what we have already planned, what environmental assessments have we done, and so on. And that goes on into the report, whereas the phase 1, which is a requirement for council to have and for council to be satisfied with as part of the application process. So that phase 1 is here for your review. It's a draft. We are very open to feedback from council on that. The next report is in addition to this one, which is the terms of reference, which was requested by staff, by the planning staff. So we have submitted that to planning, and I expect to get some feedback from planning, and then we will update this draft terms of reference for the AIA. That's the report here. So the next one is the land tenure report. Part of the requirement is for us to show you that we have control of the land that we want to put the turbines on. So in this land tenure report, which of course is a confidential report, is the signed option agreements by the 5 landowners that we have engaged with to provide the land for these 6 turbines. They are all, it's not the entire option agreement, it's the cover page. It is the description page, and then it shows the signatures and that these landowners have agreed to partner with us in an option agreement to later sign a lease agreement for 20 plus 10 plus optional 5 and 5 years. The next report is the project development report, which is a requirement for us to submit to the Ministry of Indigenous Affairs. Upon this report, they will give us a list of indigenous communities that we need to consult with as part of the need or the requirement to consult. So this report is basically an overview of everything that we know right now about this project. Everything is packed in there. It's a bit of a larger report, but it really goes into every detail. In some cases, it says the decision has not been made. In most cases, even if we are right now, for instance, on the turbine selection, we are toggling between 2 turbine types. I put both of them in there, even so we haven't made a final decision yet, which one of those 2 turbines we would be selecting for this project. The next one is the proponent report. That is also a requirement under the ISO to make sure that the proponent, meaning the entity that is making the application, has been established. We are in the process of doing so. We have engaged a local lawyer in Woodstock to create this entity for us. But the structure is already described here. You want to do something very similar with what we did in Guns Hill. You want to create a limited partnership, and in that limited partnership, ProWind will be the first limited partner, but there's at least two open spots for the indigenous community as well as the community co-op to become limited partners. We could create a fourth spot if the municipality would ever be interested in becoming a limited partner. That's not unheard of, but that's not necessary. Some communities talked about that. Could we become a partner, an equity partner in the project? And it could be as small as 1% or 2% and as big as whatever is available. But again, at this point in time, I just want to mention that it is no problem for us to open up another spot in the limited partnership. Report number 7 is the community benefit plan. This is an early draft. What I put in there is what we have proven that we have done at Guns Hill. We have a clear community benefit fund at Guns Hill. We have an amazing project that we have been supporting for the last 6 years or 5 years, which is the Hodges Pond Recovery Project, which has become a go-to place in the local community for hikes and walks. And it's been amazing to see the transformation of that area with us as the limited partnership being the lead sponsor in that. I could envision something similar in Southwest Oxford, but this report is, like I said, very high level, very open. It would take a discussion between council and staff and us to see what would be the best benefit for the community. So this is not a closed report at all. We want to make sure that we talk about the community benefit program. The report number 8 is website communication. We wanted to make sure that you see first what's going on our website, on that website for Bower Hill. So all of the pages that we will put on there are already in here. They're being uploaded as we speak, but it's not going to be made public until the end of this week. And if you would come back to us and say, hang on for a bit longer, we are okay with that. But we just wanted to let you know that we are ready to publicize this information on the website. The report number 9 is questions from community members. We have a collection here of all the questions, or most of the questions that come to us from community members over the past year and a half. When we get a question, we tend not to just give an answer because we know we are biased. Right? It's very, of course, we are pro wind. We also are pro environment. what we want to do is when we research a question, we research peer-reviewed sources for those questions. And I think that's one of the most important things that we can do and that we must do, because we have opinions. But if I get a research study that has been done and peer-reviewed and approved that supports the point that I'm trying to make, I'm so much more credible. And that's what we're trying to do in this document, where we have provided the answers. But I have an additional document that I add to that one. It's called Wind Vision 2025. It was written by Ken Weir. Ken Weir is the largest Canadian wind and solar energy institution or agency, I should say. They released a report in 2025 showing in the back over 42 cited studies in order to support the points that are being discussed in this report. And those two go together. So we would like to leave these reports with you in printed form. I only printed one copy. I'm glad to print more. I feel that electronic is a better way to transmit this because it is a bit of paper. If I can leave that with you, David, or with you, Julie? Yeah. So they can be reviewed, but I will send these reports to Julie. Is it okay if I send them to you today for distribution? I do have to say that many reports, and I didn't put confidential on all of them, but you know what's confidential and what's not. When we're talking about very specific landowners, I would appreciate as much confidentiality as can be. And same thing when we talk about very specific turbine specifications and things like that. But I trust you in that. So the question that I will ask at the end, or maybe right now, is I'm quite sure that you have a working modus for something like that, and I don't want to presume that I know that. But it might be that after you review this report, if at any time you want to call us into a working meeting or discussion meeting in order to clarify issues, we are very open. But like I said, I'm not sure what the right modus is, and I'm looking for guidance when it comes to that. But I'm quite sure that these reports provide more questions, maybe hopefully provide some answers. Why does it matter? The 36 megawatt of renewable energy at Bauer Hill powers thousands of homes in Southwest Oxford via distribution through the electricity produced at the wind farm. This energy is produced and consumed in the community. I cannot stress enough how strongly I feel about that. That why do we so often import one of the most expensive resources that we have in the community in order to distribute it if we could produce it in our own community? There have to be benefits to that. And I just want to point that out. And the project embodies our commitment to sustainability, resilience, and meaningful community engagement. This is not just a phrase for us. We truly mean that. Of course, we have experienced our share of resistance, but we have never shied away from meeting with the community. Some of you may have been at one of our community meetings that was very well done. And I'm not talking about us, I'm talking about from the community. They were very respectful. People came to me afterwards and said, look, I'm still in opposition, but I really respect the way you guys doing that. And that's what we want to continue. We want to be respectful. We want to answer the questions transparently and in a respectful manner. And I think that way we gain the community trust over time. And that is the end of my presentation, and I'm very open to questions now.
Okay, thank you very much. Questions, Councilor Booker, you're first.
This might be off the wall, but they keep telling us that it's the problem, they can't meet peak times. And yet they're putting in these battery storage things, like the one going into the Fort McGrail pit is there any way to work in collaboration with them, because they're already putting a transmission line up through? I don't know, it's just a thought.
Yeah, I mean, in principle, that's exactly what's happening, right? Because, as you know, electrons go where they want, or wherever the least resistance is. So our hope is that with the battery storage that's already in that area, that can only help. Because when there's surplus being produced, the batteries are charging up. Now, would they come from the same lines? I honestly don't know that. But I would assume that, Alex probably knows more
Well,
about that.
it's interesting because this project is gonna be going to the Ingersoll transmission station and the Woodstock one, and the battery project's right between the two. So, you know, it's hard to tell exactly where an electron is gonna go, but I think that if either of these projects is overproducing at a time when the demand's low, it's gonna go towards that battery demand. So I think it's.
The battery is like another user, right? If you had now a big power plant there that uses X number of megawatt of capacity. Battery is pretty well the same thing. When the battery has capacity, it takes the energy from wherever it can get it, if there's surplus energy, and fills it up. We are creating additional energy that can allow it to do that.
Council Craig.
I'm interested in knowing how much money will be spent on this project, how much money will be brought into our community. So what's the total cost of the 6 turbine project?
We have not done the full budget. I'd be deceiving you if I tell you, but we know that we have to budget approximately $2,000 per kilowatt hour capacity. So you're talking about between 80 and $85 million in development. It's about $2,400, between $2,200 and $2,400 per kilowatt hour. So it's a project that will bring significant amount of money into the community. I mean, of course, some of it, and actually the majority of that goes to suppliers overseas, where we buy the turbines and all that, right? But a lot of it goes into the community. All of the BOP, the balance of plant, will be done in the community. We encouraging hiring local from our BOP contractor. In Gunsell, our BOP contractor was RES, one of the large renewable energy contractors, and we did hire local. Of course, the people that are coming into the community eat and sleep in the community during the construction. A lot of gravel material and concrete material came directly out of Oxford County. I'm not sure if there is gravel, of course there's gravel pits in south of Oxford. We will favor the local purchasing.
Council Craig.
I had a question for you, and they'll come back to me.
Council.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Helmut, you mentioned that in the current procurement, they're looking for 1,500 to 2,000 megawatts of additional production in
Capacity.
Yeah, is that all renewable or is that all sources?
It's all sources. It was initially it started out as renewable, but the Minister of Energy has opened that up to all sources. But the procurement is purely on, at least at this point, unless it changes again, is purely on price. And renewable, especially wind renewable, can easily compete with price of gas or any other energy. On the nuclear side, I think the price would be about the same, but the development timeline is way, way longer on nuclear than it is on wind. So most likely nuclear will not be able, other than refurbishment, maybe cannot compete in this LT2 because the requirement is that the energy will be produced and go online by the Q1 or Q2 in 2030. Nuclear cannot do that.
Just one further question, along the lines of procurement and contracts, I just wonder how do you determine, like, obviously you're doing this for a profit. How is the price that you receive for the electricity produced, how is that determined? If I think back to, the early 2000s, late 1990s, when a lot of solar projects went into place on farms, clear across the province, there was a huge uptake because the contracted amount per kilowatt hour was about 4 times higher than what it cost to buy the same power from the province.
Yeah.
It was great as a landowner if you got the contract, but from a provincial standpoint, extremely expensive power to buy. And so I just wonder how is the price determined for yourselves on these projects?
Yeah, just one word if I can, to the procurement that happened in the end of the nineties. The government at that time, rightfully or wrongfully, it doesn't matter anymore right now, wanted to create momentum, and that's where the high price came in. The procurement here is purely competitive procurement. That means we have to calculate how much will it cost us to produce this energy, which then we know that we're producing about 135 million kilowatt hours with a project like that per year. That translates into a PPA price, or price per kilowatt hour. And that price is what we will be submitting, well, plus the margin, submitting competitively into this process. The process is looking at it in two ways. The first is they look at, is this energy deliverable? Meaning, do they have capacity on the line that you want to connect? And we have clarified that upfront already. The second thing is, if it's deliverable, what is the lowest price of all of the deliverable projects that have been submitted? And that's how it's been awarded. It is purely on price. There's also a point value system, which works a bit against us because it favors number one, northern communities, and that's 3 points. The second one is non-prime farmland. That is 3 points that's been awarded. Indigenous partnership is 3 points that's awarded, and turbines built on indigenous reserve land or indigenous land is another 3 points. And what the point value does is we did a calculation, most likely the most we can get 3 out of those 12 points, and it makes about 0.9 cents of a difference per kilowatt hour. Meaning, so if somebody would build on Northern Reserve in Northern Ontario, outside of prime farmland, directly on that, would be receiving 12 points, where we would be receiving 3 points. We would have to bid about 0.9 cents lower in order to be at the same competitive level. We don't think that there's any projects being planned on reserve land. At least that's what we're hearing from the indigenous community. So we're competing our 3 points against 9 points if somebody builds or proposes something in Northern Ontario outside of prime farmland. Now, we have to also consider it is more expensive to build in Northern Ontario because you build much longer access roads, you build much longer transmission lines in order to get to the main transmission lines that are already available. So we believe that we can absorb that 0.9 cents per kilowatt hour on the bidding process. But it is clearly a competitive bidding. What we have to do is we have to calculate our cost for the entire project. We have to calculate our operations cost, build all that into, or calculate that into a price per kilowatt hour, and then the smallest possible margins that we can live with in order to be competitive. That's what everybody's doing. It's a level playing field. And I don't think that we at disadvantage or advantage by that, yes, sir.
Just follow up to that then, so you contract with the IESO to supply this power, for what period of time do you contract?
20 years.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a 20-year contract. After that, the ISO right now is looking for repowering contracts that are expiring up to 2028. Our council will expire 2034. So eventually we will be talking about a repower program because the turbines can easily produce well for 30 years, maybe even 35 years. But yeah, the contract is 20 years. After that, there's no obligation by the government to buy the energy, we believe that they will continue to buy it.
So just to be clear, your price is set for 20 years?
It's set for 20 years. There is a small increase. It's 20% of inflation increase from the starting price. So if inflation is 2%, then 0.4% increase we'll see in that period.
Thank you.
Other questions? Councilor Perry.
I thought of my question. Based on your experience at Guns Hill, what impact would one of these towers have on the farmers' property taxes? Do you have any idea? And that obviously would be built into their lease. I'm assuming.
Yeah,
So do you have any idea what one of these would mean to the property taxes?
I don't know the exact amount, Carl might, so I might ask her, but we are in the contract, we are paying for any increase in property tax. Yeah, go ahead.
There's a separate line item on the property tax bill, and that's the portion that we pay.
So you pay the, okay.
We pay the increase of property tax because good, it's good that it's listed as a separate line item. So it's an additional property tax
So if
for,
we increase their property taxes, you're gonna pay.
we pay for it and you receive it.
That's all I wanna know.
Yeah.
Do we get paid?
Any other questions? Seeing none, I've got one, and you kind of raised it a moment ago under community resistance. So if we, as council, at some point, we have to give approval, some type of approval to say, we're supportive or not of the project. And for council to make that decision, they wanna, I suspect, base it on fact rather than on myth or opinion. And so understanding what are the community resistance issues might help us prepare for doing research on what are the facts of the case versus what is commonly put out on social media or either for or against, right? So I'm just wondering, one that comes first to mind to me is always the health issues. And I've got some ideas around that, but I'm just curious, what have you heard in other cases, or what is the industry hearing in other cases that we might want staff to do some research around to be able to bring us back, this is peer reviewed, or this is accurate information as compared to this is accurate opinion.
Yeah, it's an interesting question because we went through this now twice, right? With Guns Hill first and now with the developments that we're doing here. It's interesting that the opinion shifts over time. With Guns Hill, the big issue was property values. Will my property devalue because my neighbor has a wind farm on it? So there's empirical research on that that's been done by several universities, two of them that stand out, and they are mentioned in the one report that I brought to you. The second one was bird mortality. That was at that time the two overriding issues. Interestingly enough, we have done a mortality study at Guns Hill 5 years after production started, which is a requirement. We have to do that. We very likely have to do that with Bower Hill as well. And in the report, it shows the interesting fact that for every single bird that's being killed by a wind turbine, it shows how many are killed by other man-made or feline-made danger, so to speak. Interesting enough, cats are the greatest threat to birds. For every bird that a wind turbine that suffers under a wind turbine, 2,400 birds are being killed by cats. About 600 by cars, about 1,200 by windows and high-rise windows or buildings. So that's in the report. Now, this time around, the number one issue is the use of farmland. It seems to be coming up. Why is there a shift? I think it has a little bit to do with media or what media is picking up. So there is definitely a societal influence there. So the use of farmland is the greatest one. yes, we do use farmland. A wind turbine, once it's built and completed, uses less than 1 acres of farmland for the roads, the turbine and the crane pad, which these three things are permanently there. We are trying to mitigate that by putting the roads as much as possible, either on the shortest distance or along boundary lines, where quite often it's less farmed right up to the boundary, and if we can use that area, that helps. But the other thing is that we need to recognize, I looked at the energy density of wind turbines. So on 1 acre of land, I can produce 22,000 megawatts of energy per year on that 1 acre of land. And I know it's not a fair comparison to compare energy with food, but corn is also energy. And if you were to make that comparison, a wind turbine on that 1 acre produces 1,000 times the energy that you could produce with corn on that 1 acre. Please don't hear me say that I'm saying this is a fair comparison. We are farmers. We want to produce our food, and we will always produce our food. But with a wind turbine, you can produce on more than 99.4% of your farm continuously, even with the wind turbine on there. It's only a 0.6% of that 120 acres that we have to put a wind turbine on that we are using. But yeah, truly 100% we are using farmland. The other one is stray voltage, and that is has been well researched, is an issue if the grounding is not done properly, either on the wind equipment or on any other equipment on the farm. Our requirements are much more stringent than the farm requirements on when it comes to grounding. We need to do extremely good grounding in order to protect the wind turbines and the electronics in the wind turbine. So we feel that we are well mitigating on that problem, but clearly it is a concern, but it's measurable. Right, stray voltage can be measured before and after the wind farm is being built. So it would be very easy to determine, is this related to the wind energy production or is it related to anything else that's happening on the farm? The noise concerns is more and more defined. And the government is now saying, the government of Ontario is saying that on all non-participating noise receptors, you need to have a distance of 550 meters. And we were able we have approximately 100 noise receptors in that area, and 99 of those meet that criteria, and one will meet the criteria because we're making another change. So we are investigate that very thoroughly. And then the last one is the recycling. So we have done significant research on what is recyclable. The one concern right now is blades, but more and more companies are coming out with opportunities or possibilities to blade recycling. So blades right now on wind farms that are being decommissioned in Europe, mostly Eastern Europe, are stored because it's known that there will be recycling available within the next short period of time for blades as well. Right now, at this point in time, it's difficult to recycle.
Good, Councilor.
I think I've asked you this question before, but I forget what your answer is. What's life's expectancy of the blades versus the rest of the turbine?
The blades should surpass the turbines.
Okay.
Yeah, we from the refurbishing that we know in Europe, if the blades are changed, it's in order to increase the energy, not necessarily because they're bad. Now, when something breaks, quite often you hear about the blade, right? A blade cracking or something like that. We do blade inspection at Gunsville every 5 years. We usually do it one time with drone and then the next time with actually rope. Right now we do rope inspection to make sure that the blade integrity is there. That's just common business sense to do that.
Councilor.
People that I've talked to, they're also concerned about the sight lines. They think that these turbines are ugly.
Yeah.
And they they have to look at a turbine to see the sun come up, and they have to look at a turbine, to see the sun go down. I would think you'd get a lot of issues around, the statics of, turbines. How do you deal with that?
That's one thing that's hard to deal with, other than making sure that throughout the process, the community is engaged. There have been studies done about the visual impact of turbines. And the one clear common denominator where the visual impact is less of an issue is in wind parks where the community was engaged, both through possibility of investment, where community members can become partners in that and can benefit from that, or through benefit programs. So we are exploring those opportunities as well. I like the wind turbines. Some people may not. But what we can do is we can make sure that we talk about it. We can also show, we have a program right now that we're working on, it's not refined yet, where we can actually show the visual impact on a tablet, where we can go to the farmer that says, hey, what will that look like from my house? And we can show them exactly in the area while you're moving the tablet where the wind turbine is, how high it is, where it's standing. So it gives more transparency and more open communication.
Okay, any other questions? Thanks very much. I've got a list of things. The one thing you didn't mention, and I've heard this previously, the potential for throwing ice or something off the end of a blade. Does that come up from the public very often?
It does not. I haven't heard much of that. We know it's an issue. That's why wind turbines stop when there's icing on the blade. In order to protect the turbine itself. Most turbines can't, no turbine can run with significant ice on it. But most turbines stop operating when there's ice buildup, and only starts up when the ice buildup is gone. And the way it's measured is by having two anemometers. One of them is a fixed and heated, and the other one is an unheated anemometer. And when there's ice buildup, the unheated anemometer becomes heavier and turns slower. So the turbine knows there must be ice there, and then it stops.
All right, any further questions? We have a appointment at 10 o'clock, so, okay, thanks very much. I look forward to going through these reports and getting them electronically.
Yeah.
And we'll wait to the next time you present, I guess. So.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you very much for your time.
Oh, Councillor Gibney.
No, I was just gonna ask you if we could get those reports forwarded to us electronically, and maybe not the ones that are confidential, but the rest of them.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, thanks very much. Now just about 10 o'clock, and we have a recorded revision hearing. So, right. Which is what? Oh, all right, apparently we're having a 5-minute break. So, let's find the thing. Okay, so time to go into quarter revision, we move here to appoint the members and move into quarter revision, so we're moving a second, we're moved by Way, second by Thurston. So, Council Council Justice Parker, appoint Council Craig Gillis, Council Pete Dillman, Council Paul Bushner, the quarter division for Vincent Municipal Drain, and from the quarter division, convene at 10:03 a.m. for the Vincent Municipal Drain second sitting. Any discussions? All those in favor? Opposed, that's carried. I'll ask for a revision, I think, we're here to chair,
Yes,
so set yourself up as you will.
all right, well, call the quarter revision to order at 10:03. Motion to accept the agenda. Moved by Paul, seconded by Pete, all in favor? There we go. All right, so we're opening to hear any appeals on Vincent Drain, so we'll hear from first of all, you want to come to the table and present your thoughts?
Thank you very much. I'm Bertha. I brought along, Sean Dowling with me as well. He's the one that actually purchased the property from, and I feel like he would be a valuable resource to have today, just because he has a bit more of the, history on the property. I request today is very simple. I'm just looking for, a fair and equitable, appeal to the assessment that's been given for this drain. We have a number of reasons that I feel that there should be a reassessment on, the assessment portion that's been given to us. I'm not sure if anyone has any specific questions to start off with, but the main reason we feel that this has not been fairly equitably assessed is there's been nothing has been factored in when it comes to injuring liability to the property, which I feel is very, very significant, and it is part of the Drainage Act as well, that should be included. Are there any follow-up questions on that part itself? Okay.
Feel free to just keep going and.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Yeah.
Apologies, this is my first drainage appeal, so. So when it comes to, injuring liability, there's a lot that goes into that. Anything that, my understanding of what I've been reading from the Drainage Act is anything that's not a natural waterway that flows through a property will have an effect on injuring liability. The water that does come through our property, that is not considered a natural waterway. And so over the years, actually over the decades, it seems like the issue's just been getting worse and worse and worse, and it's been neglected, which is brought it to the point where it is now. Well, if you put that full screen, I can reference those photos.
It is, it's just how it's displaying on the screen. But
Oh, okay.
I can go through each
Okay,
one.
no worries. The photos might be a little bit hard to see up there, but I did just share those for reference to share what the wall was previously to see how much damage it had caused and just the erosion and the destruction to the wall that was there. This was everything that, these are some of the photos from just before I purchased the property. So the damage that the water was causing at that point. If you look at those, you can see how far that wall has been leaning. Go ahead to the next one. Thank you. And here's the damage that has been caused. Again, that first photo on the left there shows the damage that was done to the wall, and then we have the damage to the culvert in the next photos there. If you go to the slide after that. This is the work that was done for part of the emergency work that was completed at the end of 2023. This work here was it was necessary. However, the process of this project caused significant damage to our property. As you can see, they cut down all of the mature trees that are on the right side there of that photo. We were never notified about this work. The reason I knew about it was because the tenants at the property called me to ask when it was gonna be done. So we just showed up and our property looked this way. Not only that, the wall that was rebuilt there, this also is not part of the proper procedures for the Drainage Act. I don't know the cost of it, but I can imagine it was quite expensive. to do this, and it was not done with, proper engineered drawings, and so this was a very expensive temporary fix. I have really tried to advocate to keep, even for the time being. I did try to bring this up at a previous council meeting, and I think it was a unanimous vote to not keep this work, which would have saved quite a bit of money, especially for my portion. I think my portion alone would have been at $35,000. On what we would have saved if they could have kept this portion of the work that was done, very, very recently. Do you want to go ahead and see the next one? This is a photo of just what the landscaping there looked ahead of time. All those trees were taken, and are gone. And then last one. Oh, sorry, we don't need to play those quite yet, but those are just some videos. So that is a portion of why I feel there should be a reassessment to our portion of the cost that has been assessed. I do want to go back to just the damaging liability here as well, if you give me a moment. So I would say that this is the biggest portion of why I feel there should be a fair reassessment. The way that my understanding is that the engineer will kind of divvy up who pays what, who gets what benefit, is it comes down to the benefit for them, the benefit,
there's the benefit assessment, but top of that, there's the injured line from the
outlet assessment, thank you, yeah, so benefit outlet, but what was missed altogether in the engineer report was injury and liability. And that is part of the Drainage Act altogether, which is in section 21, where it says the engineering report shall assess for the benefit outlet liability and injury liability, and shall insert in an assessment schedule in separate columns the sums assessed for each opposite, each parcel of land and road liable therefore. From the assessment that we have, this was just not factored in whatsoever. So there is also a document that I'm referring to here called a Guide for Engineers Working Under the Drainage Act, publication 852. It refers to general principles of outlet and injury liability, where it says that the drainage of surface water is not an inherent right for all properties, but can be acquired through the use of the Drainage Act. Under the Drainage Act, this right is acquired through the outlet and injury liability assessments. Outlet liability assessments may be levied for construction completed to avoid the downstream damages. Injury and liability assessments are levied for construction completed to address situations where damages are occurring, which I would strongly argue that damages are on our property. The water that goes through this drain, none of it, I shouldn't say none of it, an insignificant portion of the water that flows through this creek is ours. Everything else comes from the upper watershed, and we are responsible, our property is responsible for making sure that it doesn't, that there's proper route for flow and that it's not damaging properties downstream. My argument on this is that this is actually a massive benefit to everybody upstream and everybody downstream, as well as the city. It's from my understanding too, the town's sewer storm system has capacity, a 2-year storm capacity. Anything that can't fit in there is also redirected right through our property as well. So we're just taking the brunt of everybody's water, and then also being charged for it. I just feel this is an unfair assessment, and again, I'm just looking for, you know, an equitable agreement here at the end of the day. There was another part I wanted to address. Give me that here. In the engineer's report, there's a large section that talks about benefit. Benefit, according to the Drainage Act, is things that include higher market value, easier maintenance, increased crop production, improved appearance, better control of surface or subsurface water, and any other advantages relating to the betterment of the lands, roads, buildings, or other structures. To go through those points one by one there, the higher market value, you know, I've spoken to, I'm in real estate, I've spoken to real estate agents about this. The change of plans, even from what it is currently, to taking down the wall, providing a slope, taking down the shed, all the other things that are required to be taking down the trees, this is actually decreasing our property value just in its actual physical appearance. Easier maintenance, my understanding is that it's actually the town's responsibility to maintain this. I don't feel that I should be charged for the town giving easier maintenance to themselves. Increased crop production is not applicable here. Improved appearance, again, just going to my first point, I don't think that improved appearance actually applies here. I really do feel this is a devalued, aesthetic version. Better control of surface or subsurface water, this one is, important. So as of right now, our culvert is a 5-year storm, has a capacity for a 5-year storm. The new plan has a very vague, 10 to 25-year storm capacity, which means that there is a lot more water that's gonna be flowing through all at one point. The way the culvert is now, if you refer to those videos, it's actually creating a bit of a retention pond as it is to control that water all the way through. You want to read it?
I can't figure it out right now. Oh, I can't click on them or
Okay.
anything.
That's all right, that's all right. It's okay, it's okay. The point of the matter is the existing culvert is a very large, it provides as a retention pond. With that going to a 10 to 25-year storm, again, it's very, very vague. I have concerns that it's actually going to cause further damage to our property because there is so much more water going through. I don't feel that we should be, again, charged. I don't believe that should be charged to us as a benefit. If anything, it would be the upper watershed as well that's benefiting from their water being diverted away from their property so that they do have better crop production. I want to walk back here, so please compare with you for a moment. I also want to reference a document called, Fact Sheet Understanding the Drainage Assessments. This is another document that is highlighting my point that there's been no, injury liability assessment, done to the property. To quote this, it says, no owner has the right to collect such surface water by ditches or drains and just discharge it in on lands of one another. He or she has a responsibility to take this water to a sufficient outlet, i.e. a natural water course or a drain constructed under the Drainage Act. Since there's no right to drain surface water, the owner of each parcel of land in the watershed is generally assessed for outlet liability. In other words, his or her common law liability is removed by paying for the increased size or cost of the drain due to the volume of water which is discharged from their property, even though the drain may not provide a direct source of outlet for this water. The authority for this liability is set out in section 23. The important part of this I really want to highlight is it says, since through common law, a landowner is also liable for any damage they may cause from water which they collect in drains and discharges on other land without a sufficient outlet, they may be assessed for relief such as injury liability if the new drain serves as an outlet for his or her drains and prevents this injury from occurring. So that is from this authority for this liability section, set out in section 23, verse 2. Often from what I'm seeing is often injury liability is just not factored in altogether. It is a bit of a complicated thing to assess, but this, I do really feel that this is important to assess because our property really does bear the brunt of this. And unfortunately, it does seem that we're being charged for it as well.
But that would be just sort of read from there, because that one talks about why outlet and injury liability are so difficult to understand. It's written by two engineers from the University of Guelph. They're at Playground now. It was written in 1988. There's the references. Drainage Assessment Revisited by E.P. Dries, P.Eng, and H.H. Hodgson, P.Eng, retired. And it really explains really well why lawyers and engineers even get hung up on injury liability, but how important it is to include it as part of the assessment when you come upon it as an engineer, when you find lands that have been injured by a lot of artificial water runoffs, such as is happening here. Yeah, I would read it right from there. It really explains it.
Outlet and injury. There are two liabilities, outlet and injury, that are dealt with in section 23 of the Drainage Act. While the Drainage Act seems to deal with these two liabilities on virtually equal basis, those have been involved with municipal drainage for any length of time. Note that the know that virtually every drainage assessment deals with outlet liability, but very, very seldom is injury liability ever mentioned. Perhaps an explanation of this is overdue. To understand the difference between the two kinds of liability, I refer to the case of Orford versus Aldergrove. In September of 1911, referee Henderson rendered his decision, which was upheld the following year by the Ontario Court of Appeal. In his decision, referee Henderson had this to say: "It may be convenient shortly to state the practical distinction between injury and outlet liability in view of the fact that many lawyers and most engineers complain it's very difficult to understand. Where lands can be more effectively drained after the construction of the drainage work than before, because they will then have an outlet which they did not have before. They are accessible for outlet liability. Where lands are effectively drained, but where their waters are not taken to a sufficient outlet so that legally speaking, they have no outlet at all, and the drainage work will give them a sufficient outlet, they are again accessible for outlet liability. The test is that in order to enable an assessment for outlet liability, the drainage work must be necessary, in fact, or law, to enable or improve the cultivation of drainage of the land assessed. Where is the course of this examination? The engineer finds land suffering injury from water brought from upper lands by artificial means, and his proposed work will pick up this water and carry it to a sufficient outlet. He can assess for injury liability the lands from which the water causing the damage is so artificially brought that this is usually on pretty much the same state of affairs as the second kind of outlet liability, but from the opposite point of view. The test now being the existence of injured lands seeking relief, not higher lands seeking outlets. So I guess that comes back down to, I believe that our lands here really are seeking relief. There's just been decades of unmanaged water flow through this channel that is now becoming our responsibility. I do feel that if this project would have been taken care of when it first became a problem and the proper channels would have been followed, we could have seen massive cost savings for myself, for the town, for our taxpayers, for the city's portion, just even simply due to inflation. I find that anytime that you let a problem sit and you let it grow and grow, it becomes worse and worse, and it unfortunately gets more expensive. I believe those are all of my points for the time being. Let's think of anything else. I would like to, I'm open to any questions or comments from anybody on the council.
Questions from the committee? Pete?
Just on, do you own the lands on both sides of the drain
I
or
do.
just on the west side?
Both sides.
Both sides,
Yeah.
right up to Hay Street.
That's right, yes, that entire corner property is ours. There's 4 residential buildings on it, 7 units altogether, and the creek separates it. There's a 4-plex and a single family home on the side of the street,
Yeah.
and once you cross the culvert, there's 2 more single family homes.
Okay. And do you reside in any of those or not?
I do now, as of July of 2024.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Any questions?
This one,
Just one question, I have one question for you, obviously, we know the full amount of what currently you're being assessed at. Do you have a dollar value in mind of what you would want to, have it changed to, or?
I would honestly love to be able to answer that, but because the injury liability hasn't been factored in, it's really hard to answer because I don't know what my actual number would be if that was factored in.
Oh, if you, no other comment,
Oh, sorry, actually, one more comment I should quickly address as well. Actually, sorry, 3, and these were in my appeal as well. Maybe I should just go through, make sure I haven't missed anything on here, but part of this work too, there has been a cost effect to us because there are mature trees that have been taken down. Which there's value associated to those. You know, I've worked with lumber mills before, we've sold trees to lumber mills before. There is cost there that we were not able to capture. And again, those were just taken. Not only that, but we also, part of this project does also require us to ourselves dismantle a shed that's currently on the property. And also, it was a little bit unclear, but we also have a footbridge that currently goes over the creek that's been there, which is one of our, you know, one of the things I loved about the property when we bought it. And as of right now, I'm not sure if it's our responsibility to keep it there or put it back. My understanding in the verbal conversation was that it will be removed, but it'll be our responsibility to put it back, and they'll make sure it's set up so that it can be put back. That's my current understanding, but if anyone can correct me on that, that would be appreciated as well, but that will also be additional costs that we're gonna have to eat out of pocket altogether. And like, Again, going back to, sorry, I apologize for jumping around here, but going back to, just the appeal that I originally wrote. There is also with this plan, there's removal of structures, there's the footbridge issue, there's reduction in our usable surface as well. It is taking away from, the amount of land that we have. There is the additional tree removal, and then there's just the damage that's already been done to the property from the heavy machinery that's there and what will be as well. There's also some things to consider that I feel should be reflected in the report that, again, there's been verbal and some email conversations that said they were gonna reflect this, but, you know, there were over $10,000 put into a geotechnical report that was requested. That was, actually the previous owners that had paid for that. There was relocation of gas lines that were requested. There was additional tree removal that the previous owners had to pay for. There was a construction of the retaining wall construction that the owners had to pay before, and there's also about 72 concrete blocks there. That will either be reused or taken away that are also technically our property. Yeah, I think that's the main things in point of anything else that is in our appeal there, but I do feel that those things are important to address. And the actual just cost assessment and the math of the assessment.
Okay, no further questions? Okay, thank you, Ms. Small, for your presentation. Now, I'd ask if Mike DeVos, our engineer, could come up to the table and maybe he can shed some light on some of those questions brought forward. Sure.
What I would like to do, I guess, and you could stop me at any point in time and ask questions is probably easiest. There's a fair number of points that were raised in the appeal, so I may deal with them as I go through and just say, look, there's a question about it, so. The first item was discussing the protocol of the emergency work that was done. And to my knowledge, that the township identified the required work to the ministry and received approval to have the work done prior to the bylaw. Trees that were removed were within an existing maintenance corridor. It is an existing municipal drain, so the Vincent drain is an open channel municipal drain with a right of way already existing beside it, or a route for access for maintenance. So it's there, and the trees that were moved were within that space. We have no knowledge as the engineer of any work that was done unauthorized. However, I can't speak to the notification process. I would personally wasn't involved with that. Municipality did that on their own. I don't know of a required notification process through emergency work, but typically, you know, some sort of notification would have been made in some form. And then if I go on to item number 2, about the shed, the first item of number 2 is dealing with the shed. The shed was constructed within the existing maintenance corridor, which is part of the municipality's right of access to go maintain the drain when required. There was the last report that was written in 2004, and there was work done along the drain at that point. But, you know, I don't know the age, the shed didn't look that new, it's been there for a while, and if possible, you try to work around things that you can, but at certain times you can't. So you would need to have access as a municipality. Also, the shed that is there is very close to the drain itself, and there were flooding issues raised and concerns raised. And with its proximity to the channel, there may be times that during high flows, when even the shed itself would be down where the flow of the water would reach up to. So for those reasons, you know, we tried our best to keep as much of the disturbance to a minimum. But the shed itself was recommended to be removed, and then the landowners decided to, you know, to try and have costs in removing themselves prior to the work. There was also some concern raised about the footbridge, And initially, our recommendation was for the footbridge to be removed. But through discussions with the landowner, we revised and included in our report and the drawings to have the bridge stay. And then we would use some of the excess blocks, the concrete blocks, to protect the abutments. The abutments are what I would consider substandard, and potentially have future issues with them with the flow of the channel. So in order to try to help protect the abutments, we would be putting blocks on all four corners to try and help prevent the flow from eroding the earth around the sides of it. So we did our best to accommodate that request and have included sort of protection for abutments.
Could you quickly clarify, is that bridge staying there? Is it coming off? Or are we responsible for it back?
It is staying.
Okay.
It is not being removed. It's not going to be part of the municipal drain. It's still a private structure, so any future maintenance cost of that structure is still the landowner's cost. But
Which is fair.
yeah. Then the other item was heavy machinery and construction would cause further damage and disruption to the property. We do have specifications that the space, the working space in the disturbed area will be restored with topsoil and seed. We are trying to save a few of some of the trees that are coming out. If they're small enough, we're doing our best to try and save a few of those. There is a fence that will be removed and reinstalled as part of the process. There will be some referred to as nuisance or effort on behalf of the landowner to make sure the grass is growing and catching. We don't provide a maintenance, like if sometimes we come in, we put sod down, we make the contractor come water the sod and make sure it catches, but with seed, we let the landowner address the regrowth of the grass. And for that reason, there are damages as part of the allowance that are included as compensation to the landowner as part of the report. So that's included and taken into consideration when we know these things and do these things. We have reduced the working space. The existing working space is 15 meters beside the channel. And we've reduced that to less than half of that to try to minimize impacts, knowing that it's not an agricultural field and knowing that you're going to be causing disturbance and undue harm to the property. We've shrunk the working space down to the minimum possible with the equipment. So it does take a little more effort for equipment to get in and out and access the work with a smaller space, but it's feasible to do. So we chose to squeeze it, spend a little bit more money to protect the property we decided. But that was, again, there's an existing bylaw with a 50-foot or 15-meter space now. And so we're not doing anything that's not there. We're actually making the situation better as far as we were concerned with the disturbance. And then the next item was that the project has already removed numerous trees that were not part of the plan and will remove additional trees, and this will take decades to replenish. The trees were removed prior to the report being repaired. Again, it was to be able to complete maintenance and repairs, and they were within the existing working space, and some of them were within the existing channel itself. So there is an existing bylaw that covers that. As engineers and also superintendents for other municipalities, we do not recommend trees to be planted within the channel or the working space because of that reason. So knowing that the municipality may need to be into these properties to do maintenance, then you're only adding to future costs to have to deal with it at a future date. So, it's something that's, they've been allowed to grow for a long time and they were fairly big, but the municipality has the right to remove them. There was a concern raised about the loss of land mass to expand the channel. We are not using the same construction as what was there. We are having slopes and there will be some land that will be taken away from the property to widen the channel. It is relatively small, chunk of land, but it was calculated and provided. There's an allowance in the report that's referred to as right of way. So right of way is for the compensation to the property to physically make the channel wider. In this case, it is 0.02 hectares We used a rate of about $150,000 a hectare. It was low-lying flood prone land that was in areas that were restricted, non-buildable areas that you weren't allowed to build a building that close to a channel. So that came out to be $2,740 as part of the allowances. So again, it was considered and provided for in the report. The change from the retaining wall to the current plan, it says is satisfactory, but a lesser option. And this was discussed. We looked at options, we looked at alternatives, we had cost estimates for both. The wall version was significantly more costly, and there was already concerns raised about the cost itself. So it was felt that this option, which does have a short piece of wall closest to the one building, that was still going to be impacted to try and get through where the former shed kind of is in there, the southerly portion. So we reduced the cost as much as possible, but also tried to accommodate everything that was being referred to as physical issues. If the landowner wants a wall version, a more expensive version, we can do it, but then you get higher costs that come with it. And so that's something that, you know, eventually you would have to ask council to do, and then the report would have to be referred back to the engineer to be revised and resubmitted. I don't think that's the case here, it's not being requested. This is an appeal to court revision. But it was considered, but because of the cost impacts, it was not proceeded with. Going on to item number 3, and it says the unjustified property value assessment. So this is getting into the numbers that were being charged. We did distribute a breakdown of the assessments to the wall property to explain how we've calculated the assessments. And if I could, I'm going to pass out to the members of the court these calculations to explain how our calculations were done in this case. Okay. I'm not sure, do you need more? When looking at this project, we felt it was prudent to identify different components of the project and separate the costs into individual components. Some of the work being done is different, they're being done for different reasons. They service the property in a different manner. And for that reason, we did separate the costs out. We took a look at the culvert work. That is a separate type of work that's being done, not necessarily from a drainage or erosion perspective, but to provide access so that the property owner can get from one side of the channel to the other. That was one section. There was the wall section to protect buildings. Again, that's a structure being to protect specifically structures that are adjacent to the channel, not within the channel. There is erosion work that is being done to protect the property and improve the long-term stability of the property and property value. That's beyond what you would normally see. Then you have what we call the regular cost of working on an open channel. That could be whether we're on a property like this or in a farm. It's just when you go, you're gonna have brushing, clearing, you're gonna have engineering, you're gonna have allowances, you're gonna have all the regular type of works that you would typically see on a municipal drain. So then there's also some extra cost dealing with the fact that this property is now a residential property rather than a rural property. So there's extra costs and money spent to deal with, say, we have a narrower working space, we have more trees than what would be there, we have lawn to restore, we have a fence to restore. So there's extra costs dealing with the fact that it's a residential property. So that's the 5 sections that we separated the cost into, and then we assessed benefit and outlet to those individual sections independently, and then added them all together and put it into the schedule assessment after. So the paper that you have there, page 1, it shows what we refer to as the farm cost or the typical cost that you would see not necessarily identifying any of those other separate items. That was about $83,300. We assess typically benefit as a proportion of the cost. We use a modified Tajin method, which again, it uses a proportion. We take a certain value of that particular cost, 83,000, and say that a certain amount of that is referred to as benefit. Once you've established that, then you divide that benefit up to the properties that you would deem to be benefiting as defined in the Drainage Act. And you mentioned, you read some of the things that were there: better control of surface water, better control of subsurface water, increased land value, increased crop production. There's a list of things. That's typically going to occur in this part of Ontario with the topography that we have. It's going to occur close to or where the work is occurring. Once you get far enough physically away from the project, those properties will not see that improvement. Not to say that they're not involved, it's just that they're not going to see an improvement through that definition of the Drainage Act. So in this case, that's the Ball property, the Bonnefield property immediately upstream, and then Brownsville Road at the bottom end of the work. So we've identified that. We've assessed at a 40% benefit rate, which is typical for that type of work. Separated the cost to the different individuals, the properties for the benefit, which left just about $50,000 in outlet to be assessed over all of the upstream lands. There was a concern raised today. Didn't know this was going to be a concern in terms of outlet liability versus in-train liability. But yes, there's lots of documentation that explains that injury liability is not typically used. It's not something that is usually included. It's not to say that we don't consider the factors that are being discussed in it. One of the issues that was raised for the potential use of injury liability was the boat damage. And in this case, we were dealing with a wall that was not engineered in the first place. So it's not an engineered wall. It could be failing because of the lack of stability of the wall itself, more so than the water in it. The bottom of the channel is protected with stone. And it's not new. And then as well, the culvert itself is a fairly old structure. And, you know, we could have left some of that stuff in place, but the stuff at the top end is old, outdated, in poor shape, narrow, and we felt that it was best to replace that area at the top. So again, saying that there's injury from the upstream lands to that culvert, and in our view, it's requiring an improvement because of other issues, not necessarily damaged by upstream water. The water getting through that structure now, it's not any different than it was.
Just to add to that, the way where the wall is now, there, other than just like a couple of stones at the bottom of the creek, there's no protection stone along the bottom of that section. There's stone on the, like if you were looking down the stream, there is stone on the right side, but there is no stone in place to protect that wall. But the wall also doesn't continue past the footbridge, and that's where we're seeing the worst of the erosion right now.
Yeah, and there was some concern raised with that. We had discussions that the area downstream of the footbridge, you brought up the concern about our new culvert will have somewhat more capacity than the old culvert. We're not gonna go a big increase because of the idea that water cooling on the upstream side of the culvert is not necessarily a bad thing as far as stormwater management goes, trying to prevent just this big rush of water downstream. You don't wanna make the situation worse. So by making it a little bit better, you will have some more flow in there, and we did identify that, and we widened the channel a little bit on the area downstream. The area between the culvert and where the footbridge is, the ground is higher, the ditch is deeper. We don't need to make it wider to be able to accommodate the flow. But when you get downstream of the footbridge, the native ground elevation on the west side of the channel is naturally lower, so the ditch is not as deep. And it will fill up and overflow in a rain event faster than the area up higher. So we made that piece of the ditch, we made it somewhat wider. after having discussions, and we charged that increase in cost for the extra width to the upstream lands. So it's been identified and included, if you look.
Could you also clarify, just going back to the drawings, it does, the culvert right now, I believe it just says it's a vague, it's like a 10 to 25 year storm capacity. Is that going to be decided now eventually, or is it?
Well, no, that's just analyzing, when you look at the capacity of the culvert, people will look at different things when you refer to the choke capacity. Technically, when an engineer designs a culvert, you're designing the culvert to be full or at capacity when the water's at the top of the structure. So not necessarily the laneway. And a lot of people will consider the capacity of the structure when the water gets up to the laneway and starts going over the ground on top. So we analyzed both. We analyzed what happens when the water's at the top of the structure. Also, what happens when the water then, the storm event would get bigger and you get more water, and the water would keep rising up and then eventually the water over the laneway. So we've looked at both. And currently, to get up to the laneway, you're getting close between that 5 and 10 year event. It will be slightly more than the 10-year event. It's not as high as a 25-year event, but so I can't give you the exact percentage of increase in capacity, but it is bigger. We do not want to make it smaller. You know, it's typically not something that we would recommend. We looked at the impact downstream and we accommodated the impact downstream to your request. So that's the level of design. We initially were instructed to make the structure significantly bigger, but then pulled that back based on further discussions at a later date. The widening of the channel downstream, if you look at page 3, when we get into the residential cost, and again, if this was an agricultural area, having flooding in the field isn't as much of a concern. But because it's residential lands, then having that yard fill up with water is not something that you would want to have. So at the top of page 3, there's special benefits that have been pulled out of the section. The total section is just under 200,000, it's 198,000. We charge Brownsville Road some erosion control work. There's erosion protection as we get closer to the culvert underneath Brownsville Road. That's 13,970. But there's also what's referred to as DS widening, and that's downstream widening. So that was identified and charged at $9,000 outlet. So it was pulled out of the cost, not charged in any manner to the wall property. Because again, we understand that concern and we addressed it. And so that $9,000 becomes part of the total outlet to the upstream lands for that particular piece of improvement.
I didn't want to cut you off, or I just want to go back to one other point, you mentioned that, jogged my memory here. The request to widen the culvert, that hasn't been our request, that was actually requested the emergency services, so if there was ever a fire there, that they would actually be able to get over to the property.
And we've scaled that back, like initially there was a discussion of having 6 meter wide laneway on the top. And again, because the wider the laneway, the higher the cost go. So we should give that back, something to be what's more typical of today's design standard for an urban laneway.
And it still accommodates emergency services?
I don't know. Typically, this is what we see for residential areas, and this is what was brought to us to say we don't want to have that 6 meter wide crossing. There's a lot of crossings out there that are not that wide for residential lands. We're about 4.5 meter, 4 meter. I'll get my drawings here to feet.
You know if that would accommodate a fire truck or an ambulance?
It'll accommodate one vehicle but it's not gonna have like a 6 meter path, might eventually have two vehicles on it. I can't speak to the standards that they might say. We're 4.6 meters of surface of asphalt.
I see we have fire chief here, is that wide enough to accommodate a fire truck? One of our houses would catch on fire?
Doing the court, is that okay? for you?
Yeah.
I would say yes, it is. Generally, let me eat lots.
There's a little bit of space on each edge to provide, we had discussions of safety protection too. It is a laneway, it's a private laneway, people will be driving fairly slow. Like, there's not a higher speed limit like a road that we need to deal with. And we came up with different alternatives to provide that guidance to the traffic as they go over on each side. And it was your choice to have you put the protection in. They were like the plastic reflective at the top, visual guides that you can place every so often so that you can see that there's snow there. Or the visibility is not great, you can see these guidance things, they're not gonna prevent a vehicle from going off. But it's something visual to say here, I can drive down the middle of the runway if there's snow on it or that, so that was added and discussed as part of the process. But typically, when you're looking at a drain like this, we consider the impacts of quote damage to the system. In this case, I wouldn't necessarily think that I would need to go and start charging injury liability in a separate column. But the outlets themselves and the distribution between benefit and outlet or benefit and outlet / injury liability, that ratio doesn't change. We charge what is benefit and we calculate what is benefit based on the fact that there are benefits there in the properties. The remaining costs after you do that then have to either be split into outlet or outlet and injury liability. So in this case, it's all shown as outlet. If we were to try and choose to separate that outlet into outlet and injury liability, then you're just taking that amount and dividing it into two different proportions. The benefit to the lands is still there for what we've calculated in our view. That doesn't change if you choose to look at injury liability. That ratio of benefit, what I'm hearing is that the landowner is indicating they don't think the ratio of benefit is as high as what we've calculated. Right, so the idea is that the landowner thinks that we charge too much benefit to that property. And they're looking for a reduction in that. If you look at the calculations, the other thing that was assessed directly to the landowner is asphalt. As soon as we put in laneways with an asphalt surface, that's not something to consider that the upstream landowner should have to contribute to. If it was a gravel laneway, the culvert itself, the protection on the ends, and then the gravel backfill and gravel surface, that's a shared cost. If you look on page 2, the top section there is identified as culvert / laneway costs. We did identify the asphalt first. The total cost of that is $83,000. The asphalt is $13,980. It's pulled out first and charged 100% to that particular landowner. The remaining cost then is, again, it's distributed between what's referred to as special benefit and outlet. Special benefit is still benefit, but the idea is that it doesn't improve the drain. It's not helping the capacity. It's providing a crossing on top. But it's done by proportion. Again, it's still done by taking a certain proportion of that cost. In this case, we use 50% of the cost of that culvert to be charged out as benefit. That acknowledges the fact that this culvert is being made larger than what the old one was, bring it up to more today's standard, and also acknowledging that the upstream land is sending water down, right? There's water coming from the upstream lands here that are active farms. There's been municipal drains constructed upstream. It is downhill quite fast. That area has a lot of topography, and that water would naturally come that way regardless of whether there's a municipal drain there, whether there's a farm there or not. There is more, and I understand, and we take that into consideration when we do our calculations. A normal culvert crossing would be closer to the range of 2/3 or 67% of the cost as benefit. But in this case, we dropped that down to 50, trying to take that into consideration for what the situation is. Like I said, the wall cost, again, because we're changing from what we would consider a typical construction to protecting a building. Typically, you don't see properties constructing buildings that close and on both sides. So in this particular case, we have a municipal drain with buildings that are relatively close to the point where we don't have any options of trying to shift the drain, doing something different. We have to go in there and protect it.
I would like to add to that point as well, though, just going back in the history as well, all the obstructions that are in, have been permitted and approved by the city, by the township as well.
Yeah, and I can only go to the cost of the project in terms of this. There was discussion that it's been a long-standing problem and that there's been neglect. And now it's a bigger problem. But to my knowledge, I think there was discussion back, maybe not quite 20 years ago, but at least 15 years ago, through the municipality and the landowner to say that there are issues and, how to address them and to protect the drain and potentially have a new report prepared by an engineer to fix that. And that the landowner at the time chose not to do the work themselves privately. So it is not that it's been neglected, it's been chosen to do outside of the Drainage Act. We are here now preparing an engineered solution that is taking care of the issues, and the issue was still quite large.
Sorry, again, don't mean to cut you off. What portion did you say there that, the previous owner had, opted to do work outside of the Drainage Act?
To my knowledge, there was discussions in and around where the wall is and not the whole wall, because I believe that the municipality, history-wise, the municipality did construct a portion of the wall first. And then the landowner went and extended it and improved it, and made it longer and larger afterwards. So some of that wall was constructed by the municipality and some was constructed by the landowner. I think that there was discussion around the time that it potentially could be done through the act. And the landowner always had the ability or the option to request an improvement through the Drainage Act. And have an engineer appointed at any point in time. It wasn't done for multiple years. Up until we were appointed to prepare this report.
So there was a request in 2008.
That
But
was.
it was removed though and not proceeded with.
Yeah, that was, it's actually south of the footbridge. Because the report came back with, he follows too much onus on him again for that cost. Because it was adding eroded from the water, so.
Yeah, so that's the time when there was a discussion. I think you said 2008. I wasn't quite sure of the dates. But there was discussions and options provided to the landowner at the time to potentially have an engineer's report prepared, and they felt not to do that at that time. So it's not that there's been neglect, it's just there's been no action on some of the areas. The landowner's taking care of some of it themselves, some of it there's no action taken, some of it the municipality had done. Unfortunately, the solutions were not an engineered solution, and now we're here having to go back and change it.
It's on this report. But
Yeah, we didn't-
Yeah.
It was, more over connecting, so. How did some, but then, sidewalks lots of periods, but then washed away. And then, some areas, but then we cut like that, coming with 10 drain that they brought in. So there's a whole history that goes.
Yeah,
with it.
there's quite a history to this drain as far as work's been required in the past and things like that. And we've done what we felt was the most appropriate distribution of the cost, considering those factors.
So then Mike, do you have any other comments to make or?
Yeah, there was still some items, if you continue to go through, if you go to item number 4, on the appeal, it refers to reimbursement of costs. it talks about the geotechnical report. And it might not be clear to the landowner, but in our report, we identified the geotechnical report as part of the cost report. That's the most that we can do. So what would happen in that case is wherever the municipality has costs and the costs are part of the drain, they would pay contractors or particular owners in this case who paid for have that done. So that's something that you would get compensated for because it's part of what this report is doing. But it's not shown in the schedule. It's not an allowance because it's not being provided for in that manner. It's an invoice that you would submit to the municipality, which I believe has already been done. And it would get compensated. The total cost of that is about $11,620, including HST. And it's part of $11,620, which includes HST.
And that's, and is that, when it's factored into the report, is that specifically this property that receives the benefit from it, or
No.
is it factored in?
It's factored in, it's part of the residential cost. So it becomes part of the cost that then gets shared and distributed to both your property and upstream landowners. So it was considered to be and deemed to be something that was important to get, to have that information, so then we can then include it as part of the job. But then have to distribute the cost of that back like the other costs. So when you're looking at reimbursement, like I did mention that there's allowances for right of way and damages. So by the time you take the $11,620 off and then the right of way and the damages for the allowances, that brings you down to about $203,000 out of pocket. It is hard to estimate, 203 roughly. So there's factors that come back to you. One thing that was listed in the appeal that we should sort of straighten out, my understanding from the municipality always was that they paid for the tree clearing. There was 2 invoices that were done. If I looked, there was one for $5,900 and one for $12,150. So it was $18,050. I believe the municipality paid for those. I did receive copies of the invoices with the understanding that the municipality paid that. Your appeal is indicating that the landowners paid for it.
So there was, I believe, when it was still your dad that owned the property, there was a request to remove quite a number of trees that he then paid for.
Well, they removed some trees, which I think they paid for, but it was all the trees that got taken out during the emergency work that
They were not part of the plan.
weren't part of that.
No, and that's the municipality paid to have that done as part of the emergency work, the newer removals.
Yeah.
So the newer removals are included as part of the cost of the project. So we've taken those costs, that $18,050 is part of the estimate that we have in our report for the clearing.
Correct, but there was, it's from the original engineer drawings that we have that were done before, that should have been referenced. For the emergency work, there are trees that were taken down that were not indicated, they were supposed to be left, as part of the drawings that you originally provided. So they did take out trees that they were not supposed to, but the thing is they also just took the trees.
Yeah, and that's one other item to address too. When we looked at the appeal of the emergency work, typically you'd be going by the existing bylaw and the existing specifications. The existing specifications do say to leave logs for the owners. So you can clear and cut them, you can take any root balls or any tops, get rid of them, and then leave logs that have value for the particular landowner. I've tried to look at the drawings and identified maybe 8 or 9 trees that might come into that category. Typically loggers, they don't give you what you hope for the value of the wood. We would estimate around $400 a tree. At 9 trees, it's $3,600 of value of wood that technically could have been left on site for you in accordance with the specifications. I'm trying to give the benefit of the doubt on those.
That, the 400 number, I know it's very hard to assess now that they're gone, you know, we can't measure them or do anything of the sort. But just going off of a very current example, of somebody I know whose property was purchased by a developer. They were allowed to keep their trees and sell them, and they were able to sell them for $8,000 to $10,000 a piece because they're maple wood trees. Now, obviously, the type of wood is different, but I would say that 400 would be a very inaccurate number.
Ours,
It's very hard to assess. but-
ours is based off experience of other projects. The other issue that was raised was the blocks themselves being private property rather than being part of the drain. They were constructed by the landowner and purchased by the landowner to use to construct the drain. We are not needing all of the blocks. We don't have enough use for them. We are reusing some of them to construct a short piece of wall. We're using some of them to protect the pedestrian bridge. Overall, we would have been required to probably purchase 36 blocks is what we would have needed to purchase. 28 of those were to protect the pedestrian bridge, which was something that's not part of the drain. It was for your use. So really, you're not needing those. So that would leave 8 blocks that we would need to purchase from the landowner, and it wasn't calculated. The remaining blocks, which is about 62 blocks. Again, we didn't know you wanted them, we didn't know you thought there was a value to them. We were trying to dispose of them, which is gonna have cost to itself. But if the landowners wishes to have those blocks, we can leave 62 blocks on site for you to use or to sell or to do whatever you want. We realize they're not the municipalities at this point. But our view is if you want those blocks, we can stack them up and leave them on the property for you.
Aren't there, how many are being used for that section of the retaining wall that's existing, or that's gonna be staying?
I don't have the exact number. I could look at the estimate. Some of the blocks are the municipalities. So we took a look at how much net blocks we would need to purchase. And looking at what we started with and what's left over, we identified 36. But 28 of those are for something special that you've asked us to do to protect your private property. Which only left 8 blocks. New, the blocks are roughly $90 a piece. They're waste blocks. They're not engineered blocks. They're made from, at the end of a concrete production run. They create these blocks and they're excess concrete, so they leave them there. People use them where they can. So, you know, in a new situation, you'd be looking at about $700. They're not new. If you put in, $50 a piece, you're looking at about $400 for 8 blocks. That, when you look at $3,600 for the logs and the $400 for the excess blocks that are required to be purchased, that would come out to be about $4,000 total. That would address those particular concerns in my view. That's something that could be considered to address the concerns that were raised. This stuff was done before. We did have meetings and discussed. There was no ever any indication that you wanted the blocks. But that's what particular.
It was more so I felt that it should be factored into the assessment.
The item, there's another item listed in the appeal referred to as long-term impacts and risk assumed by the property owners. There isn't, like I said, there's an existing right of way that's 15 meters as part of the drain now. That's outside of the channel, and our report is reducing that width and trying to limit the long-term impact to the property. So it's probably less of an impact going forward than what you have currently by the bylaw. Then the other portion of the appeal says, I bear all risks associated with flooding due to storm flow. And I would respond to that by saying that this project is intended to reduce flooding impacts from upstream flows, but cannot be practically expected to eliminate the risk entirely. In a large rain event, you may exceed the capacity. We had discussions of making the drain even have more capacity in terms of the culvert, things like that. But it's an improvement. Channels and Mother Nature may provide flood events that will provide flooding that or result in flooding that's in excess of it, but the report is clearly being done to help try and make the situation better. The report also recognizes the responsibility of the upstream lands to pay assessments and outlet, in this case, outlet assessments, to have their water go through the property safely and through a municipal drain. There's $180,000 of outlet assessment to go through one property. That's quite large as far as municipal drains go. And so that was identified as, you know, part of the process that we've done. The last item indicated that the project should be a comprehensive approach water project, potentially using other systems of improvement outside of the Drainage Act. As an engineer appointed under the act, I can only deal with the appointment and the instructions that we've been given. If the municipality chooses to use a different method of providing storm infrastructure to the community, that's something that they would have to provide instruction to me. And we have not had any instruction other than this report. And we've submitted the report, we've gone through consideration. Now we're into the actual assessment appeal, which is beyond what this item is really indicating. And that's basically my response.
Mr. Chairman.
Okay, you have questions from,
Just on that last point, Mike, so you say you're only considering, that which deals under the Drainage Act, and I understand that, but at any point in this project, had you considered the potential of a stormwater management pond on the north side of the Wall property to be able to restrict the amount of water that would go through the Wall property at any one time and be able to downsize some of the costs on their property itself? Or is that not covered under the Drainage Act and would have?
I can cover it under the Drainage Act. I have done stormwater management measures as part of the drain. But in this case, we would have to take land away from another property and basically give full value to that property. Economics would drive us to spend a little bit more money on the channel. If we did widen the channel a little bit downstream, that assessment is $9,000. The value of land that we would take away upstream, it would far exceed that. So it's more economical to address it. We did downsize the culvert somewhat to make sure we're as close as we could practically be to the old culvert to maintain some storage up there. Originally, we had a bigger culvert. But through concerns and through the idea, the concern of stormwater management, we were able to do that to try and help utilize that area from the pipe sizing.
A couple of years ago, we had an on-site meeting there. I'm not sure if you were part of that meeting or not, but on the south side of the driveway that goes into the Wall property, there's a metal culvert that kind of points at the eastward side of the channel there toward the Wall there. Now, my understanding is that's part of the County Road 10 drain.
Yes, that's a municipal drain.
Right, and so could you speak a little bit, and you already have, but could you just reiterate to what level that particular structure has either caused damage or incurred liability on the part of the county in terms of this project?
The pipe that you're, I think, referring to is the pipe that's on the west side of the channel near the top end.
Right.
That one, I think, is, if I look at the drawing, it's probably part of the system that would come from the north, not necessarily from the county. There's other municipal drains that come from the north. But irregardless, typically these systems are designed at a relatively low flow. Municipal agricultural drains are sized at an agricultural design. So in a large rain event, the majority of the water is still coming over land, and that you need to accommodate it. Again, we have taken into consideration the value of benefit to outlet in those calculations. So we still have, again, $180,000 in outlet costs to contribute because lands are not entirely being naturally drained.
Just to add to that, when I was looking in the history too, I found a point that said, that it talks about this one, just for content. It says, up on the county road, 10 drain of 1979, the Brownsville stormwater background report. That drain is a diversion, removing approximately 89 acres from the North Brownsville drain watershed, utilizing a number of DITBs, 2 of which were the closed road ditch.
Yes, that's a different pipe. That the pipe that's being referred to there is the county. In the late seventies, identified issues due to the county road having collecting surface water from asphalt surfaces, road ditches, sort of accelerating the flow coming down. And they designed and installed their own storm bypass system. So that's trying to take water that's coming down Flow Road and taking it around the property, away from the property to reduce the flow going through the property. Again, it's limited in its scope, and in some of the rain events that cause the problems, the bigger rain events, there's still water that wants to leave the surface and flow over. That's why there's a fairly pronounced overland flow route from Culloden Road over to this drain. So there are things that have been done to try and help the situation. But you can't just say, let's reduce or eliminate this drain with the money that we're spending here. You know, we have had climate change. Some of the larger rain events are becoming somewhat more frequent. This part of southern Ontario might have been spared a little more than a few of the other areas. You go west and north of London, and there's been some successive years of quite large rain events, and I don't think you're going to be immune to them in the future.
Well, can you speak to one of the points I had mentioned before on just like the capacity of the storm sewer system that is currently in the town, and how much of that gets diverted once it overflows that capacity and comes to our property?
It's a 48-inch storm sewer. I'm thinking, if I remember correctly, I wasn't prepared for this question, but I think it's roughly a 1 and 2 year storm, but whether they're taking the entire watershed or just more of the county water, we've never analyzed their system. We calculated our flow based on it not being there, and then when you calculate, you can calculate the capacity of a pipe irrespective of what rain event it's trying to push into it. How much can that pipe actually flow? So we took our flow minus the flow that's in that pipe to come up with what we had.
It factors in if that exceeds and topples over.
It would come to this drain. The overland flow route is to this drain.
Final questions from the committee. Pete?
On page 2 of the handout that you gave us, Mike, you talked about culvert and laneway costs, and you indicated that almost 14,000 is a special assessment to the wall property for asphalt. If they opted not to pave that section of driveway, can they walk away from that portion of the cost? And is that a right of theirs to be able to do that?
Yes, now from an administrative standpoint, the act isn't necessarily set up to handle that 100%. It would be, I've seen municipalities do it. It's a non-grantable cost, so that I don't think you're going to have an issue from the Ministry of Ag and Food. Their biggest concern usually is that somehow whatever you do that's not in accordance with the report, that you're affecting their grant systems that they're providing. You know, we could make the recommendation that, and again, it might not be 100% kosher with legislation, but you could say that if the asphalt's removed, it would come off of that particular number. So as a recommendation of the court, you could add that statement. It would address it, but again, are we following the exact letter of the law? You know,
I think our portion is actually 60 versus the 50 on that one. That's what
that's future maintenance. So that, she's looking at future maintenance, I'm looking at the distribution. Now, yeah, like this, if you look at the actual schedule of assessment, that particular number, if you identify it. You go to page 12 of the report. There's a special benefit column, which is the far left column. That's identified as $48,500. That's the total assessment for the culvert to the wall property. So you could say that let's take the $13,900 and take it off the $48,500 if they choose not to do the asphalt. So that's what I'm hearing your request. You could do it, is it 100% kosher with the act? Maybe not, but it's not going to affect the ministry's granting program. So that, in my view, if I was in the situation of council, I might approve it, but then I don't want to ever say to any council that you should go ahead and not go 100% by the drainage act.
Thank you. So you mentioned the right of way that's forms part of the drain through the wall property. So is that an easement that's registered on title?
Under the Drainage Act, there's no easement registered on title. It's registered in the bylaw. So there is a municipal bylaw that has established that right of way. They are not registered on title.
So then what are the dimensions of that right of way and who's responsible for maintenance there?
It is 15 meters
From,
from the edge of the channel, beside the channel.
so what determines the channel? Because at times of high flow, obviously the channel is much wider than.
That would be low flow, physical bank. So, yeah, it may overtop and spread out the flood beside the channel, but it's the channel itself where you have a steeper slope and a flat slope up top.
And then it's 15 meters past that.
That's the current one. We are shrinking it and we're using less space in our report to try and say that we can cause undue harm and we don't need to. We can shrink it and accommodate the residential property in a better manner.
And who's responsible for maintenance of that right of way?
The physical maintenance is still part of the property. So on a regular basis, the landowner would maintain it as their land. It's a right of way that provides the municipality the right of access to go in there when needed to maintain the drain. Now, in a residential area, you would use the same specifications that we had, which would be to provide, to reinstall a fence or to put in topsoil and seeding once you've been in there and crawled out.
Just to go off of the councilor's question, about, how far that goes, I think 50 meters, like
That's a long way.
that goes well into the house
Yes,
itself. Now just going back to the trees that were, taken down, so the trees are technically on the right of way, but would they still, is the right of way, does that kind of just give permission to go in and do what you need to do, or, so even if I myself planted a tree, like, does that mean, I mean, I know this would never happen, but does that mean that they can just say, well, you have to take your garage down now because it's on our right of way?
legally, they can say they need it for access. Some of that stuff was there already when the last report was done, but they didn't make specific exceptions. Like, I'm doing this report, I'm specifically saying, here's where we're gonna go, here's what we're gonna do. But in the last report that prepared and built that and created a bylaw, that was not provided for in any different manner. It's a 15-meter space.
Well, it's just drains into the catfish. Is there any conservation requirements that have to be met too for setbacks or floodplain or anything like that?
They haven't indicated anything to us. They would have received the report. I haven't heard of any feedback from them indicating otherwise.
Any comment questions from the committee, for either the engineer or the wall? Pete?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is to Ms. Wall. Just going through your appeal, I noted that in item number 1, segment I had highlighted, you state that this deviation resulted in an inferior solution with less durability and value than the original proposal. And the current proposal is a further devalued design. Then if I go down to item 5, advocacy for a better and cheaper alternative ignored. In 2023, I strongly advocated for keeping these while constructed in the emergency work to preserve a superior solution. So you seem to be contradicting yourself in those two statements. And then further to that, I highlighted that the engineer provided an option to satisfy this. I wonder if he can just speak to those that seem to be contradictory in nature.
Yeah, so, when I'm talking about, a devalue design, I'm just talking about a retaining wall being, changed to a sloped wall. In my mind, that is a devalued option. Even if they, still get water from point A to point B, I would say just like the physical aesthetic, and all the other factors I've mentioned before, a wall is, like a retaining wall would be a better option to me than a sloped version. So I do think that's devalued. So, the wall that was replaced, there was emergency work done, and now that wall's gonna be taken away. The way it looks now, honestly, it looks really nice. It does what it needs to do. I understand that it was not an engineer drawing, but what it is currently to what it's going to be for, at least I'm just speaking specifically to that section of the channel, it will be, in my opinion, a devalued design. It's still sufficient, it still does the job. And it was at that meeting that, I've really been trying to advocate to keep that wall, because I don't like wasting money. I don't like wasting effort, and there's just been it just seems like a lot of effort and money that is, I think at the end of the day, still taxpayer money, was put in to put that wall, and there was and so, what Mike was fantastic, that I really wanted to have an option to keep that, whether that was shoring it with more rocks or getting somehow geogrid behind there. So there was a reduced version that did factor that in. I have that dated from you, March 26, 2024, just over a year ago. And my portion specifically there would have been about $35,000 cheaper, just my portion alone. And it still would have left us with a wall. But I feel it's kind of a higher value for the property itself.
Mike, can you offer any comment?
Yeah, I can say that there was that discussion held about postponing and delaying the replacement of the wall because there was a fresh wall put in there, non-engineered wall. The concern is that it is a non-engineered wall. We don't know how long it will last. The old wall eventually, due to not being engineered, with the earth behind it, the lack of weight, the wall starts tipping over. That could start to happen at any point. We don't know whether that's 3, 5, 10, 15 years. We do not know. That was brought, those discussions were held with council. Council decided that you did not want to replace part of the wall now, save part of the wall now, and potentially have to come back again in the future, have another report, because we can't do it through one report. If I prepare a report, there's a shelf life to these things. There's a limit of how long you can sit with an existing bylaw before you build it. And if you try to save the wall, you are gonna go beyond that. So I would have to shrink the report, improve part of it, incorporate part of it, but then say, well, when you need to come back, we have to do another report at some unknown date in the future. And that choice was made not to allow that to happen, but to go ahead and do the full project.
So what I'm hearing between the lines here is that the cost of preparing the second report would exceed the savings that would be realized by retaining the wall.
It's difficult to know how much that would be. I don't know. Truly, I think you would still save some money, but you're gonna have to spend more engineering definitely at the end of the day. It's just, is the temporary savings worth spending more engineering? Right, in time. There'd be, interest calculations for the money saved. You could take that money now and put it away, trying to increase that value so that someday down the road, you got more money because the cost of the project in the future is gonna go up too because of inflation. So there's all those factors of pushing things forward, that I do not have any answer for.
And I think it was just, was just for Sean here, so I get the number, but I think it was the previous section of the wall that the town did. That all didn't have the geogrid, that did last 30 years. And that's with, that pipe, it's like angled right at it, and I think in the new plan, it's gonna be diverted this way, so I'm absolutely no engineer, but just from what that tells me is that I can imagine it would exceed that, there's no way to say that for sure. But yeah, I was, And this, was there ever an option to just use those box cutters and add geogrid behind it? Was that part of this portion, or was it just shoring the rocks up to protect that wall from any?
We were just taking the wall and just trying to keep part of it. The southerly part of the wall is the part that you could save. Once you got further north, close to the laneway, we were still recommending the culvert to be redone. And the new culvert would go in the new location, so it shifted westerly. So then you're gonna have to, your channel's gonna be over. You're not gonna have that area beside the parking lot and all that, that all has to get shifted, so that stuff would still happen. But then you would shift the channel back so that it's in its original location with the southerly part. And that's the part that could be left, you just don't know how long it's gonna last at that point. It's not something that lasted entirely in the past. And dealing with the issues that the municipality has had, they chose not to want to proceed in that manner.
Sorry, this has nothing to, this is more just a question for myself, this doesn't actually reflect anything with the cost, but more for my own curiosity. But with the current plan of the slope, just the way the erosion and everything works, would you expect that this plan would exceed the shelf life of that wall?
Typically, yes. Now, would there be some maintenance required? It's possible that some maintenance required, but maintenance to a slope channel with stone on it is much less costly than what repairing a wall would be.
But I'm still responsible for 60% of the maintenance.
The 60% is the culvert.
I think I did see, or maybe it was just the section of retaining wall.
Yeah, I'll have to read the report, just give me a
That's
second.
not as important, I was just curious, because again, that was.
The 60 is for the culvert.
Yeah, no, that's okay, that wasn't so much applicable to this conversation, it was just, I wanted to bring up that I have. My main goal is just, again, an equitable solution, I don't wanna waste my money, your guys' money, taxpayers' money, and if there was a way to save that, to save everybody money, I think that's in everyone's best interest. Even if it is deferring the cost down the road, 30 years down the road is a significant amount of time. Well, I mean, I'm gonna be here at that point, so.
Okay, I appreciate your comments from you and our engineer there. Back to the committee for final comments. Heard a lot today. About to ponder. Well, wait 1 second, sir.
I just wanted, I know there's been a lot discussed right now and we kind of even got into the design of the drain and everything. So I just kind of wanted to remind you all that we are focused strictly on the assessments, the design of the drain and the option that we're moving forward with. We've already gone past that point. Okay, so we're primarily looking at, do you feel that there is reason to reduce the assessment for the wall? And if so, how much and who is going to be responsible for those costs?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Do we have the option of deferring decision and deliberating between the three of us?
You can defer a decision if you need more information. And more time to consider all of the points that have been made today, you can do that, yes.
I'd like a chance for the three of us to be able to discuss this.
I agree with discussion. Just to clarify, deliberations though are public. Okay, so if you want to discuss, this is just, if you need more information from staff, from the engineer, from the accountant, we can do that, but deliberations are public.
I don't want to tie up council time in this matter. They've already been very patient with us. But I do feel a need to speak with my fellow board members on this. So come to some sort of.
So in saying that, is it information that, or more clarity, the questions asked that we'll need to get information back from staff to make a decision? Because if that's the case, we should probably ask staff to bring back some questions, if we have any individual questions to present to the committee. And reconvene and talk about it in open session then, is that correct?
Yes.
So the decision of Court of Division, the public decision and all deliberations are public.
Yes.
And I prefer either the clerk or Mike. You can't go into closed session to discuss the Court of Division.
I'm not clear on that. I have seen both. I do not know, I have no knowledge of what is
Technically,
actually.
closed session to discuss it.
But I would think if we had questions, we could ask staff and then bring it back into a public session again.
So the quarterly vision was reconvened as quarterly vision.
Yeah. That would be an option.
Yep.
So I put it back to other committee members, lawyers, stuff. Or do you have enough information to make a decision now?
This is a decision that I'm struggling with. And along with a lot of things about this Vincent Gray. Where the modifications and everything were requested long before the wall purchase. And most of this is designed to protect the apartment buildings on the east side of the drain. Which seems to me is that they shouldn't really have been there in the first place, but that's history. We have to look at what it is now today. And with the costs that are there. And the assessment that has been put before us. Part of it is buyer beware. I think it comes down to something of that sort of thing. But if we defer it and keep pushing it off and pushing it off, then there will be a heck of a lot more liability on the municipality if one of those buildings collapse while they're still occupied. Therefore, I would move that we deny the request from Betty Wall. Or Purple Wall, sorry.
Seconders? For purpose of discussion. Seconded by Pete, discussion on a motion.
Hey, we're talking about a significant amount of money here, no matter who we're talking about, whether it's Ms. Wall, whether it's the upstream landowners. I know from other conversation that I've had with that landowner, that he is responsible for both, his property as well as the one that he rents in terms of any improvements. So he's looking at a similar expense to the Wall property in terms of the assessment of this drain. The reason I hesitate, and I agree with Council Brugner, and I'm torn on this one because I want to make sure we get this right. I want to be fair. I want to make sure we're doing the right thing. We're talking about a lot of money here. And I question whether there's any, I guess, like Mike was saying prior, whether you assess the amounts based on injury to property or whether you assess it as improvement of property, the assessment dollar value still stays the same. So I guess that doesn't really matter.
One comment that, obviously I heard it in the court mention about talking about wood and possibility of blocks. That won't be needed. I guess that can be talked about, obviously, will that go through staff or would that go through? What would that go through there?
As far as the blocks go, that could be dealt with, through staff, but as far as the compensation goes, for the trees, you have the choice of doing it outside or inside. I think from a clarity point of view and ease point of view, I might suggest that the $3,600 and the $400 be dealt with from the court to shift it from benefit to the Wall property to benefit to Hinks Street. It's done, it's clear, the amounts are there. You don't have to deal with it outside of the act at that point. You can do it both ways. I think this is a little more clear, but that's your choice.
I also just wanted to quickly add a point there. I don't want there to be a false presumption that I need all of these blocks or I want to keep them all. I just want to be reimbursed for anything that was being used because they are technically property of the property.
Yes.
And so if that's the case, I think we need some type of direction from the property owner on what their preferences with those other blocks, so we don't have to come back to this in the future, so it'll be time to consider. Yeah, just so there's a clear understanding moving forward on how those blocks are gonna be dealt with. I'm not saying that's necessarily up to the court, but just for clarification purposes, so we can get a clear and direction that we're taking.
I would just like to be compensated for the blocks that were there, whether they're being taken away or reused.
Okay,
I don't necessarily need to keep them, I would just be compensated for them because at the end of the day, they are self-equity.
so just to clarify, taken away, so that would be the ones that are not gonna be utilized in the drain, but disposed of.
Yes, yeah, I don't need on
So
my.
you're not interested in
If they're,
that?
yeah, if they're not being used for the wall, if that wall will not be kept, they're not gonna be used for that and they are taken away, then yes.
Thank you for the clarification.
Back to staff on that, does that need clarification through the committee or not?
That could be done outside, do that calculation and do a reimbursement, outside of the court. I don't know, we haven't looked at that yet, but I just needed some clarification on what that would be, so. Just tonight, we talked about some compensation for the trees that were taken down and the blocks.
It was, yeah, our calculation of the blocks was that there was 62 blocks in excess that would have been privately owned blocks that we don't need. We would have had to purchase 8. So there was blocks that would have been needed. And it was those ones that we suggested maybe be compensated for because we needed them. But the other ones, we don't need. And so they're not ours, they're the properties. We could leave them on the property for their use. We didn't think that they would be required to be compensated for. They're there, we would either, I think we showed some of them to go to the township yard, some of them to be buried. Just to get rid of them. But typically, that's not something that we would, we're not using it as part of the drain, so we didn't see the necessity for compensation for the majority of them.
So that in my mind, and this is just for my opinion, that if what we could do is just leave them on the property of the individual who owns them.
That's what I had suggested as an option, is if they want them and they wanna try and get some money out of them. And sell them to somebody, that you could leave these blocks on site as the owner's blocks.
So I would put forward then the cost of us removing these and moving them off-site, but there's an expense involved with that. And since they are already in use, there's already a cost to the municipality to remove those blocks. Now, would that be reflected in the report?
And I was gonna take a peek at that, yes, we did have an item, and there is a value in the report for that.
Okay, what's the value?
We show $3,000 to bury excess blocks and $600 to remove and salvage to the township yard for other blocks, or there's $3,600 there.
So in essence, then the property owner is paying for the blocks they already own. There's a percentage of that.
Yeah, we could take that whole value and take it off the benefit and leave the blocks for them. As an alternative.
I don't think the goal is to move the blocks, I think just the goal is to come up with an equitable solution. So. I'm just, like my fault, it's another input on that regard. The $3,600 is in the report to remove them
Or bury it.
or bury them. Okay. And that, just so I clarify, I have to do this one more time, and that's assessed to the current property owner.
It's assessed as part of the residential cost, so a certain proportion of the cost got assessed as benefit. And then the remainder got assessed to the upstream land, so it's a shared cost.
If I can address the court, remembering that this is a court of revision and that we're looking at the assessment and who pays for what. And that to assess the municipality to purchase or remove blocks that they don't own, they're not their responsibility in any way, shape or form. We don't own those blocks. We didn't put them there. We didn't ask for them to be there. And so I would just be cautious that, the municipality picking up an expense. While I appreciate the cost, to the wall property of, the total drain. We also have to be fair to everybody else in the municipality. And so therefore I would wonder, unless Public Works, for example, actually wants whatever 60 blocks, whatever, I would question why would we purchase or remove those blocks? They're not our responsibility. We didn't put them there. The ones that we did put there, we're gonna reuse, I understand, in the rebuilding of the drain. I'm just wondering how the court would justify to, the council of the township, the cost incurred.
Okay, back to the court now.
For the context of this conversation, I would like to point out that my current assessment is over $200,000. And I'd also like to point out that the blocks that are there are part of the emergency, that they are currently part of the emergency work. If they weren't needed, they could have been removed at a different point. To charge that back to me because we're no longer using the wall that's already been done. Just the alloy material. Which really is worth pointing out, I don't think that's very equitable.
May? You have a motion on the floor. Yeah.
But I was just gonna remind, there is a motion on the floor to deny the request. And then we did hear from our engineer that if you wanted to address the value of the trees and the value of the block, so in total $4,000. There is an option to reduce for the walls appeal by the $4,000 and assess that to Hank Street, and then that would be clear in the assessment schedules. But you do have a motion on the floor right now to deny.
So if you heard the clerk, motion on the floor is to deny, either, we can vote on that motion, or if somebody would like to amend that motion. Sorry,
I'd like to propose an amendment that we incorporate that $4,000 as part of this decision to remove that from the assessment. And further, that we allow them the option of removing the asphalt from the assessment as well for further savings of almost 14,000.
So that part though is part of the design, which is already done. The assessment. So we're only looking at the assessments right now, and the asphalt surface is already part of the engineer design and engineer's report.
So we have no jurisdiction there. Then just 4,000 there.
We transfer to King Street.
Yeah.
Second.
I'll second that motion, the amendment.
You got a motion on the floor, I think this is a direct opposition to say no, and then to say they bought the $4,000, and then in direct opposition, so I think the motion should actually be withdrawn.
Okay.
The first original.
So then you made the motion, so you withdraw your motion. Yeah. Withdraw your motion, you seconded, you withdraw the first motion, correct? Okay, so first motion withdrawn, second motion by. B,
I'll move that we remove the $4,000 from the assessment,
transfer to King Street,
transfer to King Street.
second by. Mr. Rubner. Any other comments from the court? Vote on the motion, all in favor? Carried.
And do we need a further motion now?
We need one motion to confirm the assessment schedules as amended.
So then,
Also move that.
moved by Paul, seconded by Pete to amend the schedules as amended. All in favor? Carried. That's all we have for Court of Revision. Motion to adjourn. Moved by Pete, seconded by Paul. All in favor? Carried. Court of Revision is now closed.
Okay, thank you very much. Planning council and,
Board should move back in the council, for revision.
that would be adjourned. We're done.
We did.
Yeah, we adjourned. We're okay.
Okay, so we're back to council and CLEP, proposed organization, training, and support. Beautiful.
So this report is to bring forward, some proposed organizational changes in relation to administrative support, within the building planning, fire and emergency management services. Currently, right now, we have, this administrative support split between two existing positions. We have one, individual that does primarily building and fire, and then we have another that helps with emergency management, health and safety and planning services. We are proposing that we realign these distribution of responsibilities to kind of flow better within the service area and the business process. So you'll see in this report that we are proposing a change to the former records management coordinator clerk's assistant role to be the legislative services and records management coordinator. And this position would now be responsible for building, planning, including records management and corporate communications and council committee support as they do now. Primarily the move with the building responsibilities is because it would better support people when they're moving through a development process. Instead of having various contacts within the township when it comes to working through those application processes, they would be with one person from start to finish. And we think that that will help catch some of the things that we have missed in the past when it comes to, site plan approval requirements or minor variance requirements and things like that. If we have one person working with the individual from the beginning, we think that there'll be a better flow of information within that service area. And then with Shane coming on board, he has been taking on responsibilities for emergency management as well as health and safety. And so we're looking at realigning those responsibilities to the protective services clerk, which is currently the health services and building services administrative support. So that, again, that all of those service areas fall within one person. We hope that this will still allow for there to be some cross-training opportunities for records management support. There's records management responsibilities with all of our administration positions, as well as the corporate communications, social media updates and things like that. So right now, our existing records management coordinator is putting together a lot of the emergency services, fire, public safety information messaging that goes out. So we'd be looking at kind of shifting some of those responsibilities between these two positions. I do know we're not looking at creating any new positions. We're just looking at realigning the responsibilities between the two existing positions that we have. Are there any questions?
So any questions from council on this? No, speaker.
So essentially, we're not talking about any position additions. We're not talking about changing compensation to the individuals that hold those positions now. This is strictly housekeeping within the staff here.
Any other questions?
It does have, there is, I guess, a slight organizational change in terms of the names of the positions as well as supervision of the position. So the fire and emergency services, so the protective services admin, Shane would be supervisor for that individual.
Okay, any other questions? Is there a reason why we're calling the protective services the clerk? The reason for this, the administrative assistant. This is a reason.
Really, I've seen that position with some of the other area municipalities and I thought the title fit, but we can certainly change that.
Okay.
I think that the clerk, the name fits into this quite a bit better.
I'm just thinking of when one thinks of the municipality and we think we were clerk. We think I think as compared to administrative assistant or admin support. I don't care. You're the ones that have to deal with it. Go ahead.
Like I said, when I was looking at the realignment of the responsibilities, there are some other municipalities that have protective services clerks, so I would put that.
Good. Any other questions from council? See any concerns? Do we have a motion then? Moved by Gillis, second by Wade, resolved that council Council Stucker talks to the chief for CLA 2025, proposed organization changes administrative support for building, planning, fire, and emergency management services, and commissioning for the council to the updated job descriptions for the legislative services records management coordinator attached to Independent Bay. This report and the protective services part attached to Independent Speed. This report further council to the revised organizational chart reflecting things that are report and attached to Independent Speed report. Any further discussion? It seems to me that legislative services records management coordinator has a rather lengthy job description, and I'm wondering, will they ever actually be able to accomplish all of those jobs in a year? You're convinced they are? I would say, okay. I just, when you read through it, there is a lot of responsibility to that. And I wondered if, not that the protective services part was, not going to work as hard or whatever, but it just seemed like a whole lot more on one end than on the other. That's my thoughts. Okay, Councilor Becker.
So is there any increase in workload as a result of this? Is everything still about the same?
Well, that's something that we will have to discuss with both individuals as we move forward. And as I mentioned, we are hoping that there's going to be some cross-training opportunities there when it comes to records management functions as well as corporate communications. Because that's something that the position does right now on their own. And we hope that we can have some more cross-training support and backup support and helping us with those items.
So the answer is yes.
Maybe, and that's fine.
I wouldn't want to do less, that's for sure. But anyways, any other questions on this report? Councilor Yip.
It's one thing for us to sit here and discuss it, but it's staff that deals with this on a daily basis. I would say they're in the best position to recommend what they want to see happen, and if it doesn't work out, we can always talk about it again later. I'm perfectly willing to take their advice on this.
Anything further? I guess we're good for all those in favor? Opposed? That's great. CL 19. Deputy Chief Building Drainage Superintendent. Judy.
So again, this is report is to bring forward another proposed organizational change, which I know we have had some discussions about. We have an individual, our current drainage superintendent has been working through certification requirements to become the chief building official. So we are proposing that we create the position of a deputy chief building official drainage superintendent to kind of help support this individual and continue their training and moving along into that role. We will be discussing later the temporary appointment for a chief building official to work directly with our current drainage superintendent as they finish up the last of their certifications. We will likely need to have some conversations in the future about providing additional support for drainage. But that will come as we move through this process and looking for council support for the creation of this position at this time.
Councilor Becker.
When I go through this, I'm thinking this person will have two bosses. As a drainage inspector, they'll have a boss, and as a building.
We're actually proposing that this position will report directly to the CAO or designate. CAO. Yeah.
Okay, any other questions on this? Seeing none. Again, this is an organizational rather than a person. In theory, despite the fact that it's actually a person. Okay, any further discussion on this? Seeing none, we will move on a second here for this one. We don't move by Becker, second by Wade. Result, Council Township Surplus Office, report CL 19/2025, proposed organizational change. Deputy Chief Building Official Drainage Superintendent information for the council approved the Deputy Chief Building Official Drainage Superintendent job description. That's appendix A to this report. Any further discussion? None, all those in favor? Oh, that's great. I have 11:56. Is no one coming today? Okay. Okay, so no discussion items, agenda items, correspondence, we have a motion there, moved by Gillis, seconded by Trigger. That item is 53 to 58, is anything taken out, anyone? Okay, be noted in file, Councilor Hill. Okay, so Councilor Hill, you wanted to ask?
And item 58. That's one of those, I read through the report, and it's one of those items that, to me, almost seems like too big of a monster to tame. And so I'm very encouraged to see the county take a lead on this, yeah, despite the lack of funding from the province. I'm not sure I grasp all the nuances of the report, and I'm wondering if we could get somebody from county to come here and present it to us.
I'm sure we could. Do you want to kind of a brief overview of what the strategy and how it will play out in a more practical thing?
I think so, you know, and granted, Southwest Oxford is probably not gonna play any role in any of this. But I think it's, again, it's one of those things that is, one of the larger scourges of society. In this day and age, the whole, idea of addictions and homelessness and mental health. And, I found it to be very encouraging that the county is stepping forward and trying to take a lead on getting a handle on this. I'm not sure how many municipalities are doing similar work, but, this to me was a good news story, and, I think it needs to be highlighted.
Again, like I said, Mark, is incredibly complex. But as are the lives of those who are struggling from, various problems and one of them being housing and not health care. So, I mean, they don't have simple lives like any of the rest of us, they're complex, and solutions to the problem are gonna be complex as well. I think we'd all like to have a silver bullet and say that's it, but that's not gonna happen. Okay, note staff and ask, about, do we have, Rebecca come out and give us a comment on it? Okay, good. Anything further on this? Then the motion is to note file, between 53 to 58. All those in favor? Opposed, that's carried. Accounts payable? Everybody, Gardner and Parker. Those are the following accounts we approved, trailing accounts payable from March 16th to March 29th, 2025, $2,197.70, payroll number 6, general, $7,408.12, payroll number 3, council, $8,703.71, payroll number 3, fire, $21,839, payroll number 2, police service report, $626.06, for grand total of $2,285,677.59, change the statement. Go ahead, Councilor Perry.
Do we have that much money in the bank?
Yes.
Thank you.
Oh, when I was reading this, I thought.
It's his favorite question.
Okay, any other, questions on this report? All those in favor? Opposed, that's carried. Let's do correspondence items and then we'll break for lunch. So we have a motion there. Moved by Yitman, seconded by Brookner, and the motion will be
Note file.
59 to 63.
Correct.
Okay, any discussion? Councilor Gillis.
Just a question on number 63, whether we've supported a motion like that before. Obviously, I know that municipal drains and tile drains in general, the cost has gone up substantially over the years, whether we've supported a motion like this before or not.
Not that I'm aware of. So in this portion, it is how much an individual can borrow on a municipal drain through the provincial program, right?
For tile.
For tile, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, so, that's what there's, I don't know what the minimum, I don't know what the maximum is right now. Because there is one, I think. The province was lobbied quite a few years ago about their interest rate on tile drainage,
I remember that.
but not the amount.
So in reading this letter though, they're saying that they can borrow up to a minimum of 250,000. When in fact, I think they mean a maximum of 250,000.
Yeah, I was wondering that.
Because the volume you can borrow is 250,000 above. For a lot of people, it's outside of acceptable. They do want to borrow for the 30,000 to 100,000. They got to take down the drain that they weren't expecting. So, go ahead, Mary.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, no,
So Councilor Gill.
Can we possibly get some clarity on that correspondence for next time, then? Whether that's the case or not?
I think it's one of those, that it's a minimum of 250, if, province wanted to go higher, they go higher. But what it actually says is, the minister of doesn't, well, we've never had anybody take a plus, it may have, you know. I don't think that was the intent of the plus.
I don't know either, but I'd like some clarity.
Yeah, okay. All right, so the others are noted and filed, any further discussion on any? Seeing none, all those in favor, noted and filed, opposed, that's carried, and we'll break for lunch for half an hour.